Has housekeeper number 3 moved out yet?
Get lost, parasite.
My in-laws were grinning and insulting me. Behind them, Kenny was absorbed in his phone, acting as if it had nothing to do with him. I'll be out in 5 minutes.
Oh, that's good. Cut ties with us as soon as possible.
I'm so glad the rude daughter-in-law is finally leaving.
I couldn't help but feel disgusted by my in-laws' laughter after my response. They probably thought, finally, we can get rid of the strong-willed daughter-in-law. Thank you for everything, I said, leaving the house. As I walked away, a smirk crossed my face. Well, the real show starts now. It wasn't they who abandoned me, but I abandoned them. A month later, my phone was flooded with dozens of missed calls from my father-in-law. Oh, finally figured it out. Took them long enough. I murmured, answering the most recent call.
You make how much a month?
As he sputtered out his words, I chuckled and revealed the truth. I'm Helen Anderson, a 27-year-old wife who works for a major company. I'm married to Kenny, but we don't have kids yet. Kenny was originally a client representative. We hit it off because we were the same age and had similar interests. After dating for about 2 years, we got married.
Helen, this weekend, my coworkers invited me out.
Of course, go ahead and have fun. Kenny smiled as if he was relieved at my words. He is kind, but of a timid nature. He avoids conflict and can never say no when others invite him to things. On the other hand, people have always said I am strong-willed.
Helen, the fact that you can stand up for what's right is one of your best traits.
But if you don't tone it down, you might never find a husband.
My parents worried about that a lot. They were thrilled when I announced I was getting married. In reality, whether the person was a man or older than me, I always spoke my mind. It sometimes caused trouble, but I've never regretted my choices.
I really admire that about you, Helen.
Most importantly, Kenny accepted me for who I am.
When I first saw you standing up to your boss, I thought, if I'm with her, I can be happy.
When we first met, both of our senior coworkers were present. At the time, my senior made a mistake and tried to pin it on me, so I argued back fiercely.
That's when I fell for you, Helen.
Normally, most guys would have been put off by that. But Kenny said he liked that about me. I doubt I'll ever meet someone else who would say such a thing. That's why I confessed and married him. I love your kindness, Kenny. Meeting him was the best thing that ever happened to me. When we were newlyweds, I truly believed that.
You want me to talk to John?
One day, Kenny sounded troubled while on the phone with someone.
Man, John is such a headache.
Did something happen?
Yeah, apparently John moved out.
Kenny has 2 older brothers. One of them, Alex, is married and lives out of state. I only met Alex at our wedding and haven't had much contact with him since. John, isn't he the one who's divorced?
That's right.
John, the eldest, still lives with Kenny's parents. I don't know the details, but I've heard that a few years ago, John's wife left their home and they ended up getting divorced. So what happened with John?
I'm not really sure, but he suddenly said, I'm leaving, I can't handle this anymore, and just took off. Mom called and asked me to convince him to come back.
As far as I know, my mother-in-law is a stay-at-home mom, and my father-in-law doesn't have a steady job. So John, being younger, was likely the one supporting them financially. That must be why they're panicking and reached out to Kenny.
Man, both Alex and John. They just do whatever they want.
By the way, how's Alex doing?
Oh, he's completely out of the picture. Apparently, he's even taken his wife's last name.
Kenny's parents had tried contacting Alex, but he didn't even pick up the phone.
Anyway, I'll head over to their house tomorrow and see what's going on.
Okay, I have to go into the office tomorrow, so I can't go with you.
That's fine. I'll handle it myself.
Kenny looked troubled, but there was a hint of happiness in his expression. Come to think of it, Kenny once told me,
Being the youngest of 3 sons, I didn't get much attention from my parents.
his parents adored John, the eldest, for his academic success, and they cherished Alex for his athletic ability. But Kenny, who wasn't exceptional in either area, was mostly overlooked. Maybe he's happy they're relying on him. If it were me, I'd think, why now? I muttered this while watching Kenny call his work to request time off. I guess since I grew up in a family where I was doted on, I can't quite understand his feelings. Still, John leaving. There must be a serious reason for it. John, as I know him, is quiet and hard to read. I heard he spent most of his time studying and later worked at an international company. But he's not the type to brag about it, and he's known for being reliable at work. Maybe I should reach out to him myself. The truth is, John and I have crossed paths at work. So, I know how well regarded he is, and I have the means to contact him. But it feels awkward using work-related contact information for something personal. Well, I'll wait and see what Kenny says when he gets back tomorrow. I murmured as I began preparing for work the next day. I usually work from home, but I have to go into the office periodically. Tomorrow is one of those days, and I have an important meeting. So I couldn't afford to take the day off. But the next day, I regretted letting Kenny go alone. The next day, I went to the office as planned. Maybe I should ask about John while I'm here. The thought crossed my mind, so I decided to talk to one of John's colleagues and headed to the department where he works. However, I was told John was on vacation and no one knew the details. Going back to the office after a while is exhausting. I'm home. Wait, what? When I returned home after work, I heard someone talking in the house. Tilting my head in confusion, I assumed it might be one of Kenny's guests and walked inside.
Oh, welcome home.
Finally back.
What were you doing out so late?
To my surprise, Kenny greeted me with a sheepish smile, and my in-laws were there in the living room. I froze in shock, not expecting them to be here. Why are your parents here?
We decided we're going to live here with you.
What? I looked at Kenny, stunned, but he quickly averted his eyes. What did she mean by live here? Before I could ask Kenny, my in-laws started explaining.
We live in a rental, and John was the one paying the rent for us.
But because of his selfish actions, we can't stay there anymore.
According to them, John had been covering their rent, but since he left, the landlord told them they had to move out soon. So they clung to Kenny when he visited and, unable to refuse, he brought them back here.
The movers are coming tomorrow, so as a good daughter-in-law, you should help.
I wasn't aware of this. I have work tomorrow, and I don't agree with living together. You should find an apartment for yourselves.
Don't get cocky just because you're living here on Kenny's salary.
My father-in-law's words made me raise an eyebrow. Sure, the house is under Kenny's name, but we aren't living on just his income. We pay the mortgage from a joint account. And honestly, I contribute more than he does. Yes, it's in Kenny's name, but the payments...
They're in a tough spot right now. Can't you help until things stabilize?
Kenny interrupted me, cutting off my words. His eyes were clearly telling me, "Don't say anything unnecessary." Fine, they can stay tonight, but I'm not agreeing to live together long term. They need to move out as soon as possible. I told my in-laws firmly, then grabbed Kenny by the arm and led him to the study. "What's going on? Explain yourself."
Well, when I went to visit, they had already packed their stuff, saying they were coming here. I couldn't say no.
Kenny stammered through his explanation as I sighed deeply. No matter how much your parents pressure you, don't just bring them here without discussing it. That's how I really felt. This house isn't just yours. Don't make decisions on your own.
I know, I'm sorry, but they're my family. We have to help them out.
Kenny grinned awkwardly, but there was no real remorse in his expression. If anything, he seemed pleased that his parents were relying on him. Like I said before, I'm against living together, and I'm not going to be bossed around by your parents.
I'll back you up on that, but try to handle things smoothly, okay?
I married you because I love your kindness, but if you keep dismissing me, I'll have to reconsider things. Continuing the conversation with Kenny would only lead to him brushing it off. At this point, I might as well address his parents directly. I should have forced myself to take the day off. If I had gone with him to his parents' place, there's no way I would have let them move in. I would have made them sign a lease for any available apartment and ended it there. It was too late for regrets now, but I couldn't help feeling frustrated with myself. And so, the temporary cohabitation with my in-laws began.
Hey, stop hiding in your room like a proper daughter-in-law and do some chores.
I'm working. If you want something, do it yourself. Living with them was nothing short of a nightmare for me. They didn't understand my job and thought I was just locking myself away. Thankfully, my home office has a lock due to the sensitive nature of my work, and I've soundproofed it, so they don't disturb me while I work. But that doesn't stop my mother-in-law from banging on the door or shouting loudly, which wears on me mentally.
Must be nice. Women don't even have to work, and they still get to eat.
My father-in-law also never missed a chance to make snide remarks whenever we cross paths. Meanwhile, he only goes to day labor jobs when he feels like it and comes home to drink. I often sighed, wondering how he could say such things. If you dislike me that much, why don't you just leave now? Of course, I didn't hesitate to stand up for myself, and I called them out every time. But they didn't like that either. Whenever I spoke up, they'd grumble about how a daughter-in-law should behave or how they're supporting me.
Helen, you're an adult. Can't you just get along with them?
Kenny, who had initially apologized for his parents, was now taking the easier route and reprimanding me.
Look, you're the daughter-in-law, so just do what they say.
Lately, he's been saying things like that more and more. Between Kenny and his parents, I was getting more exhausted by the day. I eventually decided it was pointless to engage with them and instead focused on my work and household chores. Honestly, I wish they'd just leave soon. Sounds rough. It was the day I went to the office. Noticing how exhausted I looked, my coworkers approached me, and during break time, I vented to them. They sympathized with me and expressed anger toward Kenny and his parents, which I appreciated. Just as I was feeling grateful, someone called out to me.
There you are.
John? It was John, who had been unreachable for a while. I was surprised to see him here and stared at him in disbelief.
I'm really sorry my actions caused my parents to become a burden to you.
Well, to be honest, it's been a huge hassle, I said bluntly, and he gave a wry smile. But what made you leave so suddenly?
It wasn't really sudden, actually.
That's when John told me the real reason he left his parents' house. And after hearing it, I finally understood his actions. In that case, would you mind if I did something about it?
What?
It's only been a month of living together, but I've had enough of Kenny's lack of help. If things don't change soon. John looked surprised by my words. Eventually, he nodded firmly.
I'll help however I can.
Thank you. And with that, I began taking action. A month after I made that declaration to John, I can't take it anymore. I want a divorce. I asked Kenny for a divorce.
Wait, divorce?
Kenny, clearly not expecting to be told about the divorce, responded in a confused manner. If he had said something like, "I'm sorry" or "I'll change," maybe I would have reconsidered.
Oh, that's great. You don't have any kids, and who needs a complaining housekeeper anyway?
A housekeeper?
Got a problem with that. A wife is just an unpaid housekeeper, you know. Though you weren't even good at that.
As my mother-in-law sneered at me, Kenny remained silent.
Get rid of her, that parasite.
Yeah, a wife who can't get along with her in-laws is no good.
Kenny, encouraged by his dad, rejected me as well. And just like that, we quickly divorced. Since the house was in Kenny's name, I was the one who had to leave.
If you beg now, I'm sure my parents will forgive you.
You're the one who should be begging.
You're really arrogant, Helen.
With that as his final remark, Kenny began ignoring me. Feeling deeply disappointed, I grabbed the bags I had already packed and headed for the door.
Finally, the eyesore is leaving.
My in-laws chimed in.
Has housekeeper number 3 moved out yet?
Get lost, parasite.
My in-laws were grinning and insulting me. Behind them, Kenny fiddled with his phone, acting as if none of it concerned him. I'll be gone in 5 minutes.
Good. Cut ties with us as soon as possible.
I'm so glad the rude daughter-in-law is finally leaving.
I couldn't help but feel disgusted by my in-laws' laughter after my response. They probably thought, finally, we can get rid of the strong-willed daughter-in-law. Well, thank you for everything. With that, I left the house. And a smirk crossed my face. Now, let's see what happens next. It wasn't they who abandoned me, but I abandoned them. A month later, my phone was flooded with missed calls from my father-in-law. Oh, so they finally realized. Took them long enough. I muttered, answering the call. Long time no see. What can I do for you?
What can you do for me? What the hell is going on?
He immediately started yelling the moment I answered, causing me to instinctively frown. Honestly, can't he speak without shouting? Yelling like that out of nowhere is just loud and annoying.
You didn't steal Kenny's money, did you?
According to my father-in-law, he and my mother-in-law celebrated by splurging after getting rid of what they called me annoying parasite. Soon enough, their savings were gone, and they started receiving letters demanding payments from various places. Of course, with Kenny's income, he couldn't possibly support your lifestyle, let alone manage the mortgage payments.
What? Kenny works at a big company. He shouldn't have any financial issues.
It's true. Kenny used to work for a big company. He was working there as a sales rep when we first met. He doesn't work there anymore.
What?
Actually, he was let go. However, he has since left that company and is now working as a temp at another one. Back when we applied for the mortgage, he was still a full-time employee, so we could qualify. But now, as a temp, there's no way he can cover the payments.
That's impossible. And you're saying he got fired?
Kenny can't say no, right? He got himself into trouble by signing unfavorable contracts. A particularly pushy client had him agree to deals that put his company at a disadvantage. It might have been forgivable if it had happened once, but after it happened multiple times, Kenny was forced to resign. I tried to support him during that time. It's okay, Kenny. I'm earning enough. Just work at your own pace. Thanks to that, Kenny was able to get back on his feet and start working again as a temp. When I explained all this, my father-in-law's voice trembled.
What's your monthly income?
I make about $5,000 a month. I responded with a smile, revealing my truth. In fact, my dad runs a company. I work as a dedicated programmer for him, earning a decent salary. It's because of my connections that Kenny was even able to get that job. My dad's company is well known, so you can't just waltz in without solid skills. Kenny got in easily because I recommended him as the president's daughter.
This can't be happening.
It's not a lie. But moving forward, don't expect to spend money like before. My dad, the president, no longer has a reason to employ your son. My father-in-law audibly gasped at my words. In fact, when I decided to divorce Kenny, my dad said,
Then there's no need to keep him employed anymore.
if Kenny had the skills, he could stay. But knowing my dad, that seemed unlikely. So, just to clarify, it was me supporting your lifestyle.
Hey, is what she's saying true?
Suddenly, there was another shout, and I could hear chaos erupting on the other end of the phone. It seemed they were now fighting among themselves. Having no need to stick around for this, I hung up and blocked their number.
I'm really sorry about my family.
John, who had been watching our exchange, apologized to me. We were talking about my situation while I was staying at my parents' house. Please don't apologize. You're a victim of your parents, too. John had explained everything about his parents when he approached me at work.
To be honest, those two are the reason I got divorced.
Apparently, John's ex-wife and Alex's wife couldn't handle the constant harassment from my mother-in-law. That's why John's marriage ended. And Alex moved to his wife's hometown, cutting ties with his family.
Even though they were like that, I took care of them because they're my parents. But once I realized they were still causing trouble for my ex-wife and Alex, I decided to cut them off.
Despite the divorce, my mother-in-law continued to complain, saying things like, that useless housekeeper didn't do anything, and how dare she not even give us a grandchild.
She even sent messages to Alex's wife, accusing her of taking away my son.
Complaints started coming in to John from both his ex-wife's family and Alex's family. That's when John told his parents, I've had enough, and gave them a 3-month notice before leaving.
I figured 3 months was enough time for them to find a place to live on their own income, but they didn't take me seriously.
Unprepared, his parents told Kenny that John had suddenly left, and, as expected, they ended up crashing at our place.
I told Kenny it was their fault and that he didn't need to help them.
John explained that when Kenny reached out, he gave him the full story and warned, if you take them in, Helen will be their next victim. He advised Kenny to leave them to fend for themselves. But Kenny brought them home anyway, forcing me to endure them in the end. Hearing all this, I made the decision to walk away from both Kenny and his parents. They'll pay the price for underestimating me just because I'm the daughter-in-law. First, I reached out to Alex to get more information on the in-laws. John had given me his contact info, so I was able to get in touch quickly.
They're the kind of people who always want someone they can use.
According to Alex, his parents intended to turn him into what's known as a scapegoat child, someone who would work for their benefit and follow their every command. That's why they pampered him just enough to keep him compliant.
My wife was the one who made me realize it.
Thankfully, Alex's wife saw through their behavior, and Alex finally woke up to the reality of the situation. After that, he chose to distance himself from his parents. So, I'm guessing you have no intention of helping your parents, no matter what I do?
Of course not. I've cut ties with them. Do whatever you want.
After hearing Alex's side, I then spoke with the neighbors near the in-laws' house.
Those two have never had a good reputation around here.
Their behavior had been so bad that even their relatives avoided them. One of the neighbors added,
I remember them saying something like, our youngest son's never been useful, but at least he'll listen to us. When the time comes, we'll leech off him and his wife.
Considering they said that where the neighbors could hear, it was clear they looked down on Kenny quite a bit. In a way, Kenny is kind of pitiful, isn't he? Maybe. He had been starved for parental affection, having not received much attention growing up. That's probably why he ended up being so easily manipulated by his parents. But that doesn't give him the right to treat me poorly. The more I learned about Kenny's parents, the more convinced I became that I owed them no mercy. And so, I decided to leave Kenny along with them.
Well, it looks like you're finally acting like a proper housekeeper.
About time you knew your place.
I didn't intend to leave them a single thing of mine. As I prepared to leave the house, I kept doing my chores so they wouldn't suspect a thing. Completely unaware of my plans, my in-laws laughed, thinking I'd finally accepted my role as their housekeeper. Thanks to their ignorance, I managed to escape from that house without any trouble.
So, what do you plan to do next?
I smiled warmly at John's words. Of course, I'm going to make sure they pay for what they've done. I've always been strong-willed, and that's what kept me from giving in to those people. But they've taken away the happiness of John and others. They need to be held accountable for that. Just as I renewed my resolve, the doorbell rang. Oh, it's Kenny.
Helen, please come back.
Standing at the door was Kenny, looking distressed. Without opening the door, I responded through the intercom.
Dad's been blaming me, saying he never thought I was such a failure.
According to Kenny, after my phone call, his dad had laid into him. And seeing that, his mom quickly understood the situation as well.
You're completely worthless. Fix this right now.
She scolded him relentlessly.
Don't come back until you bring that wife home.
With that, his parents kicked him out, locking him out of the house.
I didn't even have time to grab my keys. Please, Helen, come back.
So he kept begging me. Oh, so all he cares about is saving his own. That's what I thought, watching his behavior. I used to think you were kind.
Helen?
But I was wrong. You just side with whatever is most convenient for you. You don't mind sacrificing me for your own benefit. You're a terrible person. I'm sure it wasn't that he couldn't stand up to others because of a timid personality, but rather because he found confrontation too troublesome. And he pushed the burden of that onto me. Our divorce is already finalized. I owe you nothing.
Don't say that. I thought you were strong enough to handle everything. I admit I leaned on you too much, and I'm sorry for that.
Don't be ridiculous. Do you even realize what I went through in that house? Every day, the door to my office was pounded on. If it were just that, I could have put on headphones and ignored it. Those two treated me like dirt. Whenever I prepared a meal, they would take it away saying, There's no food for the likes of you. And if I cleaned, they would deliberately scatter trash, telling me, don't slack off. My in-laws would constantly interfere with whatever I did, always adding snide remarks. Did you really think I was strong enough to be okay? I needed you to stand up for me. That's why I kept asking you to kick them out. Even though I fought back against them, I endured because I still loved Kenny. But instead of supporting me, he grew colder by the day. And then you had the nerve to say, I don't need a wife who can't get along with my parents. How do you expect me to help you now?
That was.
There was no way I would help someone who said something like that. Kenny averted his eyes at my words. He always looked away when things didn't go his way. There was a time when I thought that habit was childlike and cute, but now it only irritated me.
Enough, Kenny.
At that moment, John stepped forward, standing behind me, and began to speak. He clearly hadn't expected his older brother to be there. Kenny's eyes widened in shock.
Why are you here, John?
I'm here to apologize to Helen for the trouble you all caused her.
John let out a sigh before answering Kenny's question. In response, Kenny glared at him through the intercom.
You were the one they loved the most, but you abandoned Mom and Dad. That's why everything fell apart.
I repaid them for all the love they gave me. If anything, I went above and beyond.
John had been the one paying for the house and living expenses, despite being young himself. It must have been an enormous burden on him.
And still, they destroyed my happiness and yours too.
That's.
Think for yourself, Kenny. Don't wait for others to tell you. This is my last piece of advice as your older brother.
Kenny hung his head at John's words, then silently walked away without another word. He never apologized to me, which made me feel a bit sad. So, in the end, I guess I don't matter to him anymore.
I'm truly sorry, Helen.
John bowed deeply as I muttered to myself. I could see the strain in his expression, and all I could do was smile weakly and say, please, don't apologize anymore. Not long after, Kenny kicked his parents out and sold the house.
There's no way I can keep paying the mortgage.
Shortly after our last conversation, my dad terminated Kenny's contract. He explained that Kenny didn't have the skills for the job and that he had only been hired because he was my husband. However, out of kindness, my dad did recommend him for a position at one of the subsidiary factories. Even so, that income wouldn't be enough to cover the mortgage. What about your parents?
They already had a bad reputation, but when word spread that they'd been abandoned by all their children, no one wanted to go near them.
Apparently, Kenny's parents started blaming each other for their situation, resulting in a huge fight that ended with the police being called. Afterward, Kenny's dad couldn't even find day labor work. And his mom, who had never worked before, couldn't hold down a part-time job due to frequent mistakes.
I heard rumors they've been seen living under a bridge.
John told me, having kept an eye on their situation. As for Kenny, he was struggling at work, surrounded by strict supervisors and reportedly crying daily. Given his naturally timid personality, he's likely shrinking back, unable to say what he wants, and enduring tough days because of it. Hopefully, this will toughen him up a little. At my words, John smiled just a little. I had never seen him smile before. After all the hardship he had endured thanks to his parents, it was no wonder he had grown quiet and stopped smiling. Now, let's forget about those people and focus on work.
Yes, let's talk about business.
I hope that John would find more opportunities to smile from now on. With that thought in mind, I threw myself into work. A few years later, I'm still working as a programmer, mainly from home.
Helen, do you think you'll have some downtime soon?
Yes, I should be able to wrap things up soon.
Then maybe we should start planning our wedding.
Since then, John had frequently invited me out, saying, "Let me treat you to a meal to apologize for my family's trouble." And we had quickly grown close. Now, we were engaged. Kenny put me through a lot, but I'm grateful he brought me to you, John. Plus, thanks to you, my dad's company has a bright future. John had changed jobs and was preparing to take over my dad's company. My dad trusted him completely, and everyone expected him to be the next president. I was working hard to keep up with him. Let's make it an amazing wedding.
Yeah, let's do it.
John smiled gently at me. The once silent man now laughed and talked freely by my side. Feeling comforted by his presence, I began walking toward a bright future.
Seriously, what is this run-down, filthy place? You have absolute zero sense of picking a restaurant.
This dinner gathering had been set up by me at my mother-in-law, Karen's insistence. Though she criticized it as expected, she was in high spirits with her wine, so that was a small relief. Besides, today we had other relatives gathered around, so I figured she wouldn't go too far with her complaints. "I'm sorry for not being more helpful," I muttered softly with an awkward smile. Then suddenly my father-in-law, Richard, stood up sharply. Had I done something wrong? Seeing this unusual intensity in the usually calm Richard, I shut my eyes tight in fear. The weight of everyone's stares felt like needles pricking my whole body.
Then why don't you go home?
He said with a coldness I'd never heard from him before, sending a chill down my spine.
What?
Richard had finally hit back. "My name is Emily Sanders, 32 years old. Soon, it'll be our first wedding anniversary. My husband, Chris, graduated from a prestigious university and now works for a well-known company. He never flaunts his accomplishments, and instead he kindly offers, let's split the household chores. Since I work part-time and have more free time, I handle most of the chores. But on his days off, Chris cooks, and I always look forward to his delicious meals."
Emily, here you go. Today I made some croquettes with big chunks of meat.
We don't have kids yet. The weekends we spend together are our little oasis. We both want children, but we're also enjoying this time just for the two of us. Or at least, that's what I tell him. Secretly, I have my own hesitations about having kids. When our relaxing weekend came to an end, it was back to Monday. I finished my shift and returned home around 4 p.m. and, as usual, she was there. Karen, standing poised and refined, right in the entryway of our apartment building.
Welcome back, Emily. Must have been a long day at work.
"Oh, well, hi, Karen. Yes, I just got back." Karen often drops by the apartment where Chris and I live. She's always waiting for me at the entrance after work, and somewhere along the line, she's become friendly with the neighbors. Today, as usual, she was chatting away with a few neighbors her age, apparently passing the time while waiting for me.
You work so hard every day. I brought a little something to add to tonight's dinner. Please enjoy it if you'd like.
This dinner gathering had been set up by me at Karen's insistence. I forced a small smile in return, feeling the dry corner of my lips crack painfully. I kept the pain from showing. "Oh, thank you so much. Would you like to join me for tea?" "Only if it's no bother. Please feel free."
Thank you. In that case, I'll take you up on it. I always enjoy our chats, Emily.
The neighbor's eyes widened in surprise.
You're quite close with your daughter-in-law, aren't you?
Emily is so sweet and genuine. I can't help but dote on her. Honestly, we're closer than most real mothers and daughters, and it's all thanks to Emily.
With a softened expression, Karen boasted about our wonderful family bond. After saying goodbye to the neighbors, we walked side by side to my apartment, seemingly the picture of a harmonious in-law relationship.
I made beef stew for you today. It's your favorite, isn't it, Emily?
Oh yes, it is. I love it.
Remember, the first time we cooked beef stew together, you.
Laughing over trivial memories, we stepped into the apartment. Then, in the instant the front door clicked shut, her demeanor shifted entirely. The calm smile vanished, and she closed in on me with a low, harsh voice.
What was that attitude just now?
In a mocking gesture, she stuck out her lower lip and hunched over as if mimicking my nervous posture.
If it's all right, may I offer you some tea, if it's no trouble?
When she was done with her exaggerated, scornful impression, she switched back to her usual domineering tone.
Why so timid? Couldn't you just say, "Oh, please join me for tea, Karen?" With a bit more spirit? Honestly, if the neighbors start getting a weird impression of me because of your attitude, what then?
Sorry. I tried my best to play the cheerful, adoring daughter-in-law she wanted, but clearly I wasn't up to her standards. She shoved the container of stew toward me, and some of the broth leaked out. To her, it was just a prop to present herself as the ideal mother-in-law. Though I knew it irritated her, it was also somehow satisfying when Chris praised his mom's cooking, especially since it eased some of my own load. I held the sticky container and forced out my thanks. Thank you so much. For everything. Karen and I get along so well, there's no hint of any typical in-law tensions. Everyone, from the neighbors to my husband and even Richard, believes that. But I am the only one who ever sees her harsher side. It reminded me of when Chris and I were first engaged.
Emily is such a lovely person, so gentle and homely. I felt so relieved. Please take care of Chris.
When we visited to formally announce our engagement, my future in-laws gave us their heartfelt congratulations. Karen didn't just praise me, she also gave Chris a bit of advice.
But remember, Chris, no matter how homey your wife may be, you shouldn't just leave all the housework to her. It's important to balance work and home. You need to be there to support Emily.
I felt truly welcomed as part of the family, and it made me happy.
Oh, I should have made Chris help out around the house more often. Maybe I'll have to pop in now and then to make sure he's being a good husband.
Richard laughed at her joke.
That's true. These days, the old school man of the house thing doesn't fly. But we shouldn't meddle too much in our kids' marriage either.
Hey, that's not even funny, Mom. Seriously, spare me that.
Chris looked adorably flustered. The first time I saw Karen's true nature was after the wedding ceremony, honeymoon, and during the blissful early days of marriage.
Wow, this place is a mess.
As she had warned on our engagement day, Karen arrived for a surprise inspection of our home. But instead of checking if Chris was pulling his weight as a husband, she was scrutinizing whether I measured up as a wife. She came unannounced while Chris was at work and looked through every corner of her apartment. Seeing some half-eaten bread on the table and a pan left in the sink, she sighed dramatically.
You can't even clean up properly as a woman. Chris really married a useless wife. What a disappointment.
Her drastic change in attitude was so shocking that, for a moment, I wondered if this was even the same woman. Maybe she had a twin or was just two-faced. Over the past year, I've come to understand all too well. Karen is incredibly charming outwardly, But in private, she's manipulative, harassing me in ways that only I can see. Of course, I tried talking to Chris about my struggles with his mother. Instead of directly mentioning her harassment, I simply said I felt uncomfortable with her dropping by when he wasn't home. Kind-hearted Chris took my side completely and gently addressed the issue with his mom. He did it so tactfully that neither of us came out looking like the bad guy.
I'd love to see you too when you visit, Mom. So could you come when I'm home?
Oh, is that so? I just enjoyed the girl talk between the two of us. But are you getting a little jealous of how close we are, Chris? Really, it's time to cut those apron strings.
With that, she accepted it with a hint of pride, seemingly pleased with his response. I thought the matter was resolved, but her visits didn't stop.
You told Chris something, didn't you? Don't think I can't see through your little schemes. Don't go telling him things you shouldn't.
She only pressured me more. After that, she became even more of a kind, loving mother-in-law. To everyone she met, she would boast about how I was a wonderful wife, thus raising her own reputation in the process. Before I knew it, she'd managed to build up her image so thoroughly that there was no way I could ever say, "Actually, my mother-in-law." Now everyone assumes I'm delighted to see her when she visits. Honestly, I've become too afraid of shattering the good wife image she's crafted for me. Since she's painted me as this gentle, domestic wife, it would be all too easy for her to destroy that image if she wanted. Before I knew it, I started feeling anxious, thinking, if I go against my sweet mother-in-law, Chris might resent me, and everyone else might look down on me. Even when Chris asks if I'm uncomfortable with his mother, I can only give a weak smile to avoid worrying him. We just get along well as women. Each time we meet, Karen makes a pointed remark.
It's been a year since you got married now. You do understand why such a capable man like Chris married someone as useless as you, right?
Oh, yes. She makes me repeat the humiliating words clearly. I am an incompetent woman who can only manage housework and work halfway. I am grateful to Chris, an exceptional man, for marrying me despite this. My role is to support him to the best of my ability. According to Karen, Chris once considered calling off the engagement before we married. She told me he had realized just how useless I was.
Emily may be clumsy, but she's obedient and honest, so you should marry her.
Karen claimed that she had strongly encouraged him. And thanks to her, I am now happily married to Chris. Both Chris and Richard are as kind as ever. Still, I can't shake the feeling that they too have hidden sides just like Karen.
Richard said you're a bit slow on the uptake, Emily. And Chris told me the other day he didn't enjoy dinner, but forced himself to eat it.
Karen shares these tidbits with me. I take it as her way of showing kindness, wanting me to see others' true feelings and adjust my behavior accordingly. So I'm always cheerful around Richard and make a point of serving drinks for him. And at home, I always prepare at least 5 dishes for each meal. Though Chris and Richard often tell me not to push myself, I know better than to take that at face value. Every act of kindness leaves me wondering, what did they mean by that? In the midst of these exhausting days, Karen assigned me the task of organizing a family gathering. It was to be a celebration for Richard's retirement, bringing together close relatives. Someone as incompetent as me? Surely, I'm not up to the responsibility. As I worried, Richard added more pressure.
I'm really touched that everyone's coming together to celebrate me. Actually, it's also our 40th wedding anniversary this year.
So, am I now expected to include an anniversary celebration as well? I couldn't even voice my doubts. You can count on me. I hated myself for answering that way. Unable to confide in anyone, I pushed forward, full of unease. Finally, the day of the celebration arrived. Gathered together were Chris and me, my in-laws, as well as Richard's siblings and their families. The restaurant I booked was an old, high-end establishment. Not exactly well known, without even an official website. Still, I thought it would be a safe choice. But standing outside, the place felt older than I'd anticipated. Sure enough, when I glanced over, Karen's face darkened. But then she quickly softened her expression and began patting my shoulder briskly.
Oh, what a charming place with so much character. Emily found and booked this for us. Thank you so much. That must have been a lot of work. Everyone, let's enjoy a wonderful meal here at Emily's recommendation. With her great taste and cooking skills, I'm sure this place will be simply delicious. I can't wait.
While praising me, she subtly raised everyone's expectations. Seeing the look of anticipation on everyone's faces made me so nervous that I could only look down with a strained smile. In the private room, I sat in the seat closest to the door, with Karen beside me. Everyone enjoyed their meals along with some drinks. The food, which I had worried about, turned out to be delicious, and the service was excellent. Just as the atmosphere started to liven up, Karen leaned over to speak to me.
Everyone's being polite and saying it's tasty because they're all adults, you know.
She had also been drinking. Though she leaned close as if whispering, her voice sounded as loud as usual to me.
Seriously, what is this rundown, filthy place? You have absolute zero sense of picking a restaurant.
As expected, she had her criticisms, but Karen seemed to be in high spirits. It looked like she was satisfied just being able to enjoy some drinks. Most importantly, with everyone watching, I figured she wouldn't push things further tonight. I'm sorry I couldn't be of more help. I muttered an awkward apology with a wry smile. But in the next instant, the room fell silent. At that same moment, Richard stood up abruptly. Oh, did I make some mistake? Seeing his uncharacteristically stern expression, a chill ran down my spine, and I shut my eyes tightly. It felt like everyone's gaze was piercing through me, making my whole body ache.
Then why don't you just leave?
The ice-cold tone in his voice, which I'd never heard before, sent a shiver down my spine.
What?
Karen, with a half-smile, spoke up.
Wait, honey, what's going on? Oh, I get it. Are you upset because the steak was a bit rare? Or maybe the stew was too bland? Oh, wait, it's probably because the waiter's attitude wasn't great, right? I mean, that subtle smile felt a bit condescending, didn't it?
With her eyebrows drawn in an exaggeratedly troubled expression, Karen tried to calm him down.
I understand you're upset, dear, but let's not forget that Emily here picked this place and made the reservation, all while juggling her job. She chose this place for you after all. Sure, it might be a bit of an odd choice, but let's focus on appreciating Emily's efforts instead, all right?
Outwardly considerate, Karen tried to diffuse his anger on my behalf. But her words, which subtly lifted herself while putting me down, pierced my heart. I really can't do anything right.
Sorry, didn't mean to pick such a disappointing place.
Huh?
Richard's anger hadn't subsided at all. In fact, I could see a vein twitching near his temple, amplifying his intensity.
If you don't like the place, you're welcome to leave.
Wait, leave? Me?
Confused, Karen, who thought she was defending me, suddenly found herself facing his wrath.
What? What did I do?
You said this was a rundown, filthy place, didn't you? Maybe you've had a bit too much and can't hear yourself talking.
What?
Apparently, everyone in the room had heard her earlier comments. With drinks loosening her up and the lively atmosphere, Karen seemed to lose control over her volume.
It's disappointing to hear you badmouth this place.
Taking a deep breath, Richard spoke.
This place holds memories for us, doesn't it? It's been 40 years. Have you forgotten?
After a moment of thought, Karen let out a small.
Whoa.
It seemed like she was starting to remember something.
When we were getting married, your parents were strongly against it, weren't they? They couldn't understand why you'd marry someone like me, an ordinary man with an average job. I suppose it's natural for parents to worry about marrying off their beloved daughter. You were truly beautiful back then. I wasn't the kind of man who could match up to someone like you.
Actually, I had heard this story from Richard while selecting the venue for tonight. At the time, he was just a regular employee with no special position, while Karen was a stunning beauty who drew attention from men. He had chosen this very restaurant to try to convince her reluctant parents, hoping to show them how deeply he cared for her.
This is the place where I conveyed how much I loved and cherished you. The place where I finally got your parents to approve our marriage. This is a special place for me, but it seems it doesn't mean as much to you.
Oh, that's right, maybe. But my parents passed away long ago, so, well, memories from so far back, I don't remember too well.
Since I had heard this story, I had chosen this restaurant, hoping it would be meaningful for them. But who could have guessed that it didn't leave much of an impression on her? No wonder Richard was hurt. But looking up at him, I saw that his expression carried more anger than sadness.
Honestly, I figured you'd have forgotten. You probably prefer flashy high-end places, don't you?
What?
Every time he spoke, Karen could only reply with a shocked, "What?" Usually gentle and quiet, Richard was unusually talkative tonight. That alone must have felt strange to her.
I knew, that you were being taken to other nice restaurants by other men.
Huh? Oh.
A strangled sound escaped her lips.
I was such a fool. I fell for your charm, your brightness, and kindness. By the time I realized you were messing around with other men, Chris had already been born. So I kept quiet all these years. But now that Chris is married, he's an adult, and it wouldn't matter if his parents divorced.
No way.
In a panic, she looked toward Chris, who responded with a steady expression.
Yeah, it'd be fine if you divorced.
No way.
Sitting slumped beside me, she seemed utterly defeated, and I couldn't find the words to comfort her. As I hesitated, Richard continued.
Of course, divorce would be inconvenient now, wouldn't it? You're older, so men don't pay you the same attention, and you still haven't gotten any of my parent inheritance.
What?
It was as if Richard saw straight through her intentions. It seems Karen, who was popular with men, decided to marry Richard because he was the son of a wealthy family. Even though Richard was just a regular employee, he worked for a major company. She relied on his kindness, lived freely as she pleased, and seemed to be counting on eventually inheriting a sizable fortune. But his parents, elderly though they are still alive and well, happily residing in a care facility.
No, I don't want a divorce. Do you even have proof I cheated? Actually, it doesn't matter if you do. Sure, maybe I had a little fun now and then. But that was over 10 years ago. It's ancient history. Right, Rachel?
Karen, desperate, turned to Richard's sister, who was also there. Rachel just frowned and shook her head slightly.
Who knows?
It seemed she wasn't going to take her side, even as a fellow woman. Karen's face, which had been pale, flushed red in an instant.
Fine. Why are you being so mean all of a sudden? It's cruel to bring up things from the past and talk about divorce now. Sure, I might have played around a little, but I always took care of the family. Look at Chris. He turned out so well because I provided a stable home.
She covered her angry, wrinkled face with her hands. Instead of unleashing her anger, she suddenly burst into tears. The sound was piercing, and the heat radiating off her clung to me, making it hard to ignore. Since she was right next to me, I had no choice but to lean away, creating a bit of distance.
Emily.
Just as I thought I had some space, she suddenly clung to me. Caught off guard, I couldn't pull away, and my body tensed up.
You're on my side, right, Emily? Forget about your father-in-law. Let him regret it. I'll just stay at your and Chris's place for a while, okay?
Wait. I was too stunned to respond. How did it come to this? The last thing I wanted was to live with her, but I couldn't refuse her directly.
No, that's not happening.
Huh? The grip she had on me loosened. Chris, with a calm expression, repeated himself.
What are you talking about? There's no way that's happening.
Rejected outright by her own son, Karen stared, mouth agape. Her expression begged, "Why?" Chris replied in a steady voice.
Because I don't like you, Mom.
He said it as casually as a good morning, without any tension.
I married Emily because I love her. Anyone who hurts the person I care about, I can't stand them, even if it's my own mother.
Chris said it so straightforwardly. While I was still processing everything, Chris put an arm around my shoulders.
Don't worry, Emily. I don't resent you at all. I know Mom's been trying to fill your head with lies like Chris just puts up with you. None of that's true.
I always averted my gaze, but now he leaned in to meet my eyes. When I looked up, he gave me a warm smile. There was no way that smile could be a lie. Then, what was it that I had feared about Chris's supposed true face? Nervously looking up, I noticed the stern expressions on Richard and his relatives had softened into gentle smiles.
What lies? I was only trying to be nice to Emily. I didn't tell any lies.
Karen shouted defiantly. But I couldn't recall a single moment of genuine kindness in her behavior. Watching her lose control like this, even I, slow as I am, could see clearly who the real liar was. Wait, so all this time, I thought you were the one holding this family together, that you were keeping Chris and Dad from getting fed up with me, maybe even stopping them from divorcing me because I'm useless. Was that wrong? Gathering my courage, I voiced my thoughts, and Chris pulled me even closer.
No, that's not true. I married you because I love you. None of that makes any sense.
Relief washed over me, and tears began to slip down my cheeks. Before I knew it, I was crying. Chris's warm smile faded as he turned a steely gaze to his mother.
I know you've been tormenting Emily, making her believe we were bad-mouthing her, trying to brainwash her. You manipulated her like that.
His voice never rose, but the pressure was intense as he confronted her. Karen shook, glancing around for support. But everyone's eyes were filled with disdain. Realizing she had no allies, she clenched her teeth in frustration.
So, I'm the bad guy now? All I did was try to guide Emily with a few helpful tips. Don't gang up on me.
Shaking with anger and desperation, she cried out, looking exactly like the villain.
guidance, more like harassment. Lying to make her feel isolated. That's what you call a mother-in-law's role? You're the real bad guy here.
Chris's calm, flat tone only made her look more pitiful. Trapped, Karen slammed her fists on the table.
What's wrong with you all? Daughters-in-law are supposed to obey their mother-in-law's opinions. Respect your elders. I'm the authority here. So what if I gave her a hard time? I should be praised for helping her grow.
She shouted louder and louder. No matter how loudly she spoke, it was clear no one was siding with her. Unable to stand the cold atmosphere, she kept pounding on the table. The beer glass on the table rattled, looking absurdly out of place. Suddenly, she grabbed the glass. Beer splashed through the air as she lifted it, lunging toward me. Oh no, she's going to do it. Instinctively, I shut my eyes and curled up. But even after bracing myself, nothing hit me. Peeking out cautiously, I saw my uncle-in-law had caught her raised arm. Karen struggled, trying to shake him off, but he twisted her wrist until she dropped the glass.
Ouch! Stop it! Let go!
Her cries sounded pained and almost elderly, but her face twisted with rage. Without loosening his grip, my uncle pinned her down to the floor.
If you resist any more, I'll arrest you on the spot.
What? You look more like a robber doing this to me. How dare you, a big man, use force on me?
And moved by her taunts, my uncle replied in a stern voice.
Because of your resistance, I now have scratch marks on my arm, and that beer you threw dripping from my hair. Shall I arrest you right now for assault?
Karen, finally noticing the beer running down his hair, muttered.
Oh.
Coming to her senses, her face turned ghostly pale. Though she stopped resisting, my uncle did not let her go.
You must have forgotten. I am, after all, still an active duty police officer.
Come to think of it, I remember hearing once. Richard's brother is a police officer, and his wife, who was standing behind him with her arms crossed, is also in the same profession. My uncle-in-law made her sit down on her knees. Since she was looking down, Chris grabbed her head and made her look forward. As he forced her to look up, our eyes met.
Do you have anything to say to Emily?
Even after all this, Karen just stammered. Finally, I realized I'd been deceived by her. Chris and Richard were never my enemies. It suddenly felt strange that I'd gone along with her demands out of respect for Chris's parents. Tentatively, I began to speak. Why did I only believe what you told me, Mom? Chris was always there for me, but I couldn't fully trust him. I'm so sorry, Chris. It was like a spell had broken. The fog before my eyes lifted, and everything came into focus. I realized it had been a long time since I'd looked directly at Chris. His relieved, gentle smile was so comforting.
What nonsense! I did nothing wrong. Back in the day, daughters-in-law weren't allowed to defy their mothers-in-law. This generation of women is so soft. I'm innocent.
She was the only one still raising a ruckus, and her presence was nothing but unpleasant. I looked at her with pity, my brow furrowing. She seemed ready to strike me again, but my uncle-in-law restrained her immediately. Then my aunt stood up.
Claiming innocence won't hold up here. I'm afraid we have clear evidence against you.
What?
Adjusting her glasses, my aunt closed in on her.
You may think you've done nothing wrong, but you're the only one who believes that. Chris recorded the insults you directed at Emily. Plus, we've gathered statements from neighbors who heard your shouting on several occasions.
Wait.
With her professional demeanor, my aunt, a lawyer, was direct and unyielding. I recalled being impressed by how well educated Richard's family was when I first married Chris. After all, Richard was a successful employee at a major corporation, and the three siblings had clearly received top-notch educations. It was no wonder that Karen had targeted Richard for his family's wealth. Surrounded by a police officer and a lawyer, Karen shrank and trembled. She must have looked down on this family as all brains, no sense, convinced they'd never catch on to her games.
This can't be.
It dawned on me that Karen was the only one who thought she was fooling everyone with her perfect mother-in-law act. I hadn't noticed how poisoned I'd become by her words, but apparently even the neighbors had grown suspicious. As it turns out, her outbursts had carried right through the open windows, loud and clear. Having lived in a detached house with a yard, she never realized her voice could reach outside. Now, wide-eyed, she stared blankly, mouth open, forgetting even to blink. Her sagging cheeks drooped helplessly, pulled down by gravity.
Emily, I'm so sorry for all the pain you've gone through. At first, I thought Mom was genuinely happy to welcome you, but by the time I realized something was wrong, you were already afraid of even me. I'm sorry for making you wait until I had irrefutable evidence against her.
If I had still been under her influence, I probably wouldn't have believed Chris, and Karen would have talked her way out of it somehow. I was touched that Chris had prepared all of this for me.
Oh, so even my own son would betray me. This whole dinner was set up by your father just to trap me, wasn't it?
That's right.
Chris answered her matter-of-factly. Without even raising his voice, his detached tone only further irritating her.
You're all against me. Ugh, I did nothing wrong.
Suddenly, she began hopping like a monkey, her outburst shocking everyone. With surprising agility for her age, she dashed toward the room's entrance. But her escape was already blocked. Standing in front of the exit with his arms crossed was their young nephew. With his bulging arm muscles, he looked every bit the strong and imposing figure, and Karen hesitated at the sight of him. Richard's family is full of reliable people, truly impressive. It seems she never really stood a chance marrying into this family. Better luck next time.
Fine, I did nothing wrong.
Karen's bitter excuses echoed emptily. Watching her stubbornly refuse to admit her mistakes, I suddenly felt the absurdity of it all.
Whether you're right or wrong isn't up to you to decide. For now, why don't you just leave? You seem to enjoy yourself eating and drinking, but clearly you don't care for this rundown place.
Even though she'd been told to leave, she returned to her seat, grabbed the remaining steak with her bare hands, and shoved it into her mouth. Her bizarre behavior left everyone speechless. While she'd apparently found the restaurant shabby, it seemed she at least liked the food. With her mouth full, she glared back at us one last time before finally leaving. We silently watched her go, behaving like a wild animal. Later, I heard she spent her time alternating between shouting and sobbing. In the end, Richard filed for divorce, and she protested endlessly, saying she didn't want it. However, she was in no position to refuse.
Wasn't your affair just 10 years ago? Too bad. But that's not long enough for the statute of limitations to have passed. If you don't want to be sued for damages, sign the divorce papers now.
My aunt, a lawyer, stepped in and the divorce was finalized. She couldn't pay any settlement. Richard didn't need her money though. He just wanted her gone. Of course, life after the divorce left her struggling financially. She was given a small settlement out of pity, but for someone used to a life of comfort, it was a pittance. Naturally, her attention turned to me. Returning home from work one evening, I found her waiting in the entryway of my apartment building.
Welcome home, Emily. You must be tired from work today.
Since that family dinner, I hadn't seen her face. I was honestly shocked that she would just show up as if nothing had happened. She looked mostly the same, though now her hairline was graying and the ends looked dry.
Emily, everyone seems to think I'm the bad guy here, but I was the only one who truly cared about you. Just between us, Chris really did say bad things about you to me. I don't want to criticize my own son, but he's always been difficult. That whole dinner, he conspired with his father to humiliate me. That's all the proof you need, right?
Seeing her fake tears gave me chills. Oh, really?
Yes, I was set up by Chris and his father, and now I'm living in a run-down apartment. I even had to start working part-time at my age. Just think, his father is retired now, so why am I the only one who has to suffer like this? Emily, can you secretly lend me a bit of support?
Despite her tears, her confident request for financial help left me puzzled. Her perfectly done makeup hadn't even smudged a bit. Her face was marked with deep wrinkles, but I could still tell she had been beautiful in her youth. Surely you have other men you can rely on besides Chris's father? Even in her later years, she still radiated that aura. She broke off her fake sobbing and twisted her mouth slightly.
What? Is that a dig at me? Since I turned 50, I've hardly been able to have any serious relationships with men. It's just boring, no excitement. Then Chris got married, and I had a blast getting close to you, Emily.
So it turns out I'd been a convenient distraction for her boredom. While I'd been suffering under the weight of her meddling, she must have enjoyed every minute of it. Lost in thought, I was startled when she suddenly squeezed my hand.
So please, Emily, you're the only one I can ask for help. I'm begging you, save me.
I felt a pang of pity for her rough, dry hands. However, I can't help you.
What? Why not? Your mother's zero-in-law is in trouble, and you won't help. Oh, I see. Chris must be bad-mouthing me to you now, right? Don't believe a word of it.
Her previous meekness vanished. She started spitting her words out. I held her gaze unflinching. Chris hasn't said a single bad thing about you. I don't know if he's ever complained about me to you, and I can't guess what he truly thinks. But I trust Chris, not you. When I said it, her grip loosened in shock. She must not have expected me to speak up against her. Taking the opportunity, I freed my hand, stepped back without saying goodbye, and entered the elevator.
Hey, stop right there. You can't just run away. It's a wife's duty to take care of her mother-in-law. Get back here.
The elevator doors closed just before she could reach me, cutting her off. As her ranting continued, I decided to call my uncle, the police officer. If only she had settled down quietly in her rundown apartment with her part-time job. Even though Richard divorced her on good terms, she just couldn't help but cause her own ruin. She tried to corner me several more times after that, but finally, my young, muscular nephew took matters into his own hands. When he showed up with a dozen or so of his friends and surrounded Karen, she was so scared that she turned tail and fled. Just the sight of those intimidating men must have made her feel like her life was at risk. It was far more effective than the police warnings. Of course, my nephew and his friends aren't actually dangerous. They're just wholesome young guys who were on the rowing team back in college. We could have pressed charges for her attempted attack, but Richard felt that prison would be too lenient. In a place with guaranteed shelter, food, and even friends who share a similar background, she'd likely settle in quite comfortably. I could picture her trying to live easily by playing the frail old woman. So instead, Richard decided that a more fitting punishment would be to leave her isolated in society, struggling to survive with no family and no one to rely on. Richard only apologized to me and never expressed any resentment, but I sensed his quiet anger. Left all alone, Karen now has no choice but to work to keep herself fed each day. Since moving out of that apartment, my life has been free of stress. And on top of that, Chris and I had a baby.
Oh, come here, come to Grandpa.
Richard is completely smitten with the baby. A huge shift from the reserved, quiet man he used to be.
So cute, so precious.
Yeah, she's adorable, isn't she? Look at those big eyes, just like Emily's. She's the cutest.
Looking at their doting faces, anyone could tell how much they love this baby, even without a special talent for reading minds.
Did something happen that you all just showed up out of the blue? One day, the family of my son Michael unexpectedly arrived at our house without any prior notice. I felt gloomy again that day because my son's family, who always visit without considering my schedule, came over. However, Michael and his family didn't seem to care at all. Far from it, they made demands like, bring out some snacks and drinks. I was thoroughly disappointed with their consistently selfish and rude behavior. Can you leave after eating? I have things to do, I said reluctantly while serving tea and cookies, but there was no response from Michael and his family. Instead, they suddenly announced something outrageous without any preamble.
We're moving into your house next week.
I panicked but desperately rejected the idea. That's impossible. Yet, Michael and his family wouldn't listen at all. Instead, I was shocked to hear them bossing me around and lost my words. That night, feeling at a loss, I decided to seek help from my friends. My name is Sue. I've been living alone in my longtime home since my husband Keith passed away 5 years ago. Our meeting was through an arranged marriage. Since we both had a good first impression of each other, we went on several formal dates before smoothly moving on to marriage. I thought I could build a peaceful and warm family with my kind and considerate husband. I had such unfounded confidence because I had fallen in love with him. However, after getting married, I found him to be somewhat sloppy. This was especially true concerning his work. At the time, my husband was a taxi driver with a performance-based salary. So, if he didn't pick up customers and make sales, he wouldn't turn a cent. But initially, during the economic boom, I thought such worries were unnecessary. However, when the bubble economy has collapsed, everything changed. The customers who used to compete for taxes disappeared overnight, leading to days filled with silence. Naturally, his income dropped to less than half of what it used to be. Amidst this dire situation, where taxi drivers competed fiercely for customers, my husband spent his days napping in the car. He couldn't break away from the mindset of earning without hardship, nor did he feel a sense of crisis or attempt to adapt to changing times. Even though he had a base salary in addition to commission, it was only enough to cover the gas, far from sufficient for living expenses. Even when faced with the decision to make efforts to increase sales or to take a bold step and change jobs, My husband remained carefree.
We have savings, and things will get better eventually. It's okay to keep going as we have been.
He said, but such a day never came, and before we knew it, he had the lowest sales at the taxi company. Even my husband felt embarrassed about this situation and started to panic a bit. That said, his sloppy work attitude didn't change dramatically. But being at the bottom was also embarrassing. He wondered if there was a way to escape being the lowest while continuing to work comfortably as before. In a baffling move, he decided to dip into our savings to make it appear as if he had made sales. When I found out, I was so disappointed that I considered divorce. However, my husband earnestly reflected and promised to work seriously, so I put aside the idea of divorce. After that, though there were shaky moments, he worked hard for the family. I also worked, and together we supported our household, eventually buying our current home and paying off the mortgage. Even after my husband passed away, I have been able to continue living much as before. We had one son, Michael. As a young child, Michael was shy and clingy, but around adolescence, he rapidly became more independent and distant. It wouldn't have been so bad if that was all, but around the time he entered college, his behavior started to deteriorate, and he began repeatedly going out at night and staying out without permission. Fortunately, it seemed like he was attending college, but there appeared to be no sign of him working part-time. I was always worried about where his spending money was coming from, and my fears were confirmed. He had been using our retirement savings. I called Michael and my husband to confront them about the savings. Then Michael told me something outrageous.
Dad said it was okay to use it, right? He said with the savings. It's fine if my part-time job is just so-so, right?
I was speechless when I heard that. I knew my husband had always been irresponsible, but I never thought he would teach our child to be the same. Moreover, I was furious that he had unilaterally allowed our son to use our joint savings. I told my son he needed to repay the full amount, but my husband insisted that repayment was unnecessary because he had said it was okay to use. In the end, we agreed to waive the repayment on the condition that Michael would earn his own spending money in the future. Looking back, I wonder if being stricter at that time could have brightened our future. As college graduation approached, Michael struggled with job hunting, but ultimately failed. He ended up becoming a part-timer. Although there are cases where dedicated part-timers are recognized and become full-time employees, I always told Michael about the importance of sticking to one job seriously. But Michael would say,
I don't need such a part-time job.
And then he would quit soon after starting. During this time of job hopping, he met his future wife, Rachel. He was 2 years younger than him and a junior in college. Rachel, who had been sharing an apartment with a friend, seemed to be struggling with her plans after graduation. According to Michael, Rachel had a bad relationship with her parents and didn't want to return home after graduation. However, her roommate decided to move out after graduation, leaving Rachel worried about affording the rent. Michael, who had been Rachel's confidant for some time, proposed living together as soon as they started dating. She also accepted the offer, and they became a couple. And then, when Rachel's roommate situation ended, they decided to move in together. About a year later, they got married when they were expecting my granddaughter, Mary. I had concerns, but secretly hoped that getting married and having a child would make Michael more serious about work. However, his irresponsibility at work didn't change. He's tried to hold down a job a few times, supposedly for the sake of his children, but he always ends up getting fired for unauthorized absences or poor performance. Even so, recently he seems to be making ends meet with a job in construction. It seems Rachel is also working part-time at a supermarket, but either because of her poor customer service attitude or for some other reason, she's been switching jobs frequently. Concerning Mary, my granddaughter, I've noticed a lack of consideration for others, such as manners and moral behavior, which raises doubts about whether she's been properly disciplined. She often barges into my house, taking snacks from the pantry without asking, or eating gifts I bought for friends. But looking back, those were minor compared to what happened next. When Mary reached middle school, she attempted to take my late husband's keepsake without permission in order to cash it in for some pocket money. It was not just once, but several times. Fortunately, I noticed before anything was sold, but since then, I can't let my guard down around her. To make matters worse, Michael tells me,
"You're too strict, Mom. She's your adorable granddaughter. Go easy on her."
with no discipline or correction given to Mary whatsoever. Mary herself seems to believe she can get away with anything when it comes to me, as her thoughtless behavior only continues to escalate. Furthermore, Rachel, her mother, keeps finding excuses to come over, hoping to get free meals and snacks, paying no attention to manners or discipline. I've been patient because they are my only relatives, but to be honest, they've been nothing but trouble. During these frustrating days, I decided to have a mini reunion with friends I met in a college club, the first in over a decade. It's been so long, you guys. What? You became the editor-in-chief of a publishing house. That's impressive. Fitting for the head of our writers' club. My recent life, well, it's been so-so. How about you all? Conversations with trusted friends were so enjoyable that I lost track of time. It seemed each had faced various hardships, but from our conversations, it was clear they were now leading relatively peaceful lives. I felt a slight envy towards them, thinking they probably didn't have to deal with the rude behavior of relatives like I did. But then, one of my friends made a comment that took the situation in an unexpected direction. This friend, like me, had lost her husband and now lives alone in her own home. She has 3 children who are each living their own lives, some married and others enjoying their freedom. She confessed, "I don't want to depend on my children, but I'm feeling anxious about my declining physical strength each year." Moreover, she wants to give up her old, uncomfortable house, but lacks the courage and physical strength to live alone in a new place. And the senior residences nearby are too expensive for her to move into. She mentioned that there had been offers to live with her son's family, but she doesn't get along with her daughters-in-law and prefers not to live with them if possible. Then, one by one, other friends started to share their concerns about old age and grievances with their families. Suddenly, the reunion turned into a life advice session. I also took the opportunity to vent about my son and his family. Though the extent varied, I was inwardly relieved to find that everyone had similar worries. During the discussion, a single friend who is an editor suggested,
Why don't we all live together?
She mentioned that there's a trend of living in shared houses, where each household has its own space within one building, allowing for mutual support among friends while maintaining personal privacy, more so than in traditional roommate situations. She also shared information from an article she had researched for a magazine feature, including the drawbacks of shared housing, maintenance costs, and the process and cost estimates for purchasing such a property. The more we heard, the more appealing it became. I, too, strongly felt that I would rather spend a peaceful old age with friends I get along with than continue being disrupted by my troublesome son and his wife. The others felt the same. As a result, the initiator, myself, and 2 other widowed friends agreed to live in a shared house. Admittedly, it still felt like a fantasy at the time, as finding a suitable property seemed daunting. However, a few months after the reunion, the friend who proposed the idea found the perfect property. It was a house with a garden in the city, sold at a bargain price because it didn't come with land ownership. As we were concerned that leaving behind the land would cause trouble later on, we quickly bought the house, and everything progressed smoothly as we all prepared to move in. I was busily sorting out my house for the move out. One day, out of the blue, Mary showed up at my house without any prior notice, just like she always does. Worried that she might complicate things if she learned about the move, I acted nonchalant, tidying up and washing dishes until she left.
Okay, I'm heading home now.
She said, unusually cheerful that day as she left. Seeing her behavior, I felt an indescribable fear and anxiety. I wondered if Mary had taken anything valuable, so I checked around the house. But nothing was missing. Just to be sure, I checked my wallet too, and everything was normal. I wonder if I've been mistaken. I thought, and for a moment, I felt relieved. But the next day's visit from my son and his family confirmed my suspicions. Did something happen that you all just showed up out of the blue? I was deeply disappointed with my son's family, who always came unannounced. But Michael and his family, unconcerned as ever, demanded snacks and tea. Thinking they were just trying to save on meal costs, I served some simple snacks and drinks and said, "Can you leave after eating? I have things to do." However, there was no response from Michael and his family. Instead, without any warning, they blurted out something shocking.
We're moving into your house next week.
What? Move here, and next week? That's impossible. I was bewildered by the sudden development. Then Mary pulled out the hidden documents about the shared house.
This is what I talked about yesterday. It's a really nice house, isn't it?
Ah, that is. Finally, I understood the abrupt actions of Michael and his family. I tried to refuse, but the 3 of them wouldn't listen at all, instead saying whatever they wanted.
Living with us is better than being an old lady all alone, right? You get to live with adorable Mary, and you'll be happy, Sue.
Exactly. We're like the ultimate filial children.
I'm taking the best room. Grandma only needs space for chores and laundry, right? From next week, We can dump everything on her, easy peasy.
Everything they said was shocking, but the most hurtful was realizing my granddaughter only saw me as a maid. Later, my son's family cheerfully left after taking money for food as a punishment for keeping secrets. That day, I forgot to eat or do anything else, consumed by thoughts of how to stop them from moving. But no good ideas came to mind. Desperate, I thought of consulting with my friends at home. Despite the short notice, all members of the share house gathered at my place the next day. So, that's the situation. It's embarrassing, but I feel like I can't do anything on my own anymore. It was humiliating to expose my family's shame, but my friends warmly said, "Thank you for sharing with us." They condemned my unreasonable children and suggested I move to the share house as soon as possible, offering their full support. Thank you all so much. Friends really are the treasure of life. The next day, I hurried with the move. Since the share house was furnished, I only had 3 boxes of personal belongings. Thanks to that, I managed to move into the share house just 3 days after discussing it with my friends, also getting rid of unwanted items in the process. By emptying the house, I ensured I never had to return to my old home again. Thanks to this, I no longer had to worry about bumping into Michael's family. This quick response was possible due to the help of my friends. Not only did they assist with the move, but their families and acquaintances took care of transporting belongings and handling the sale of unwanted items. Even friends who didn't join the shared house helped out. I was deeply grateful for meeting these friends and felt it more than ever at that moment. Having moved in early, I spent my days cleaning the shared house, organizing supplies, and inviting the friend who helped but didn't move in, showing my gratitude. In the evenings, I enjoyed tea in the communal area, contemplating life with my new housemates. I can't wait to live with everyone. Every day was peaceful and fulfilling. One day, I found many missed calls from Rachel on my phone. I had left my phone at home while going shopping at the supermarket. Oh, that's right, it was today. As I remembered why Rachel was calling, seeing the date on my phone screen, she called again. "Hello."
Oh. Sue, not answering the phone, what's the meaning of this? What is all this? I don't understand.
Rachel sounded panicked over the phone, hardly saying anything, but I don't understand.
Turn the speaker on. Hey, what's going on here? Explain properly.
Michael, cutting into the conversation, was yelling furiously. Imagining the two of them in such a state, I couldn't help but burst out laughing. "Ah, you figured it out."
What are you laughing at? Explain now. Where is our house?
The house, I had it demolished the other day.
What? You're kidding, right? Why?
Why, I always intended to sell the house and the land, didn't I? That's why I refused to live together. With that, Michael fell silent. By that time, the family home had already been demolished and turned into an empty lot. The day I moved into the share house, a friend who helped me move asked me this.
What will you do with the house?
I'm thinking of consulting with a realtor to decide. I replied, but my friend suggested demolishing it would be better, mainly because of my son's family's unreasonable behavior. My friend thought that even if I wasn't there, if the house remained, they would likely move in uninvited. which would complicate the sale of the property later. To prevent that, the best solution was to demolish it immediately. Moreover, my friend's husband was in the demolition business and could start as soon as the next day. Having sold the unwanted items in the house and having some money, I quickly accepted my friend's offer and decided to demolish the old family home. So I managed to give my selfish and insensitive son's family a taste of their own medicine.
Intending to sell it. So, what happens to us now?
Yeah. We've already canceled our apartment lease. Where are we supposed to live now?
I don't know about that. Why don't you talk to the landlord and see if you can move back into your apartment?
That's impossible, of course.
I hate it too. Everyone at the old place avoided me, and I'm banned from all the stores there, so I don't want to go back.
I was inwardly shocked by Mary's statement. It seems that Mary's arrogant behavior wasn't limited to just my home. To sum up her complaints, it seems she was displaying her usual selfish behavior not only at friends' houses, but also at restaurants. Without any sign of remorse or awareness of the trouble she caused, feeling cornered due to the cold reception she received. At that time, when her family decided to move, she ended up transferring schools. For her, it's an unexpected chance for a fresh start, and she seems adamant about not going back to her previous home or school. Rachel also shared her inability to return to their former home, apparently causing financial issues frequently at the local supermarket. She was not only problematic as an employee, but also as a customer, leading to her being banned, just like Mary. Because of that, Rachel was complaining about having to use an expensive online grocery service or having to travel to the neighboring town for shopping. Though they said they had canceled their apartment lease, it turned out they were almost evicted due to failing to pay the rent. The more I heard, the more pathetic the story became, leaving me at a loss for words.
Why would you sell it if you were going to renovate? That doesn't make sense.
Renovate? You said anything about renovating?
Mary did. When I heard about it, I assumed you were turning it into a home with rentals. That would mean we, as family, should live there, right? But you plan to sell, which really makes no sense to me.
Oh, so that's what this was about. I thought something was off. With Michael's explanation, my lingering questions were finally answered. At the same time, I was reminded once again of the selfishness of my son's family. Just figure it out yourselves, I said and hung up the phone. This truly meant I could sever ties with my son and his family. I felt a weight lifted off my shoulders, a sense of relief. However, a few days later, somehow Michael and his family found the shared house and showed up. I thought it best not to let them in, so I locked all the doors and resisted desperately.
Hey, open up. It's your fault we don't have a home, so you should give us this one. Besides, it's a waste for an old person to have such a nice house.
Michael and his family were intimidating, ringing the doorbell repeatedly and banging on the door. My hands shaking, I managed to call the police. Minutes later, the police arrived at the shared house, and Michael and his family left as if fleeing. I managed to get through today, but I was sure they would return tomorrow. Thinking this, I reported the situation to my friends. Two of them mentioned they had family members who were police officers, firefighters, and members of the armed forces, and they would consult them. Starting the next day, cops from the nearby police department started coming by to check on the share house. Additionally, after one friend moved in earlier than planned, men from the fire department and the armed force began patrolling the area and offering security advice. When Michael and his family tried to approach the house again, they left without saying anything upon seeing the men. Since then, I never saw Michael and his family again. Originally, they had planned to take over the shared house before my friends moved in. However, they were unable to execute their plan because of the regular visits by the beefy men and police officers. Meanwhile, Michael and his family, who had been using internet cafes as makeshift hotels, quickly ran out of money, frequently visiting the shared house to plan their takeover. Naturally, they weren't working. In desperation, they turned to the local government office, where they were offered the only available option, a small, poorly located public housing unit in the countryside. However, the housing unit is too small for a family to live in comfortably, and the transportation options are quite poor. They shouldn't be willing to accept such poorly conditioned property given their selfish nature, but they have nowhere else to live and no money. Moreover, they risked losing even that option if another applicant came forward. Stuck with no way forward or back, they eventually decided to move into the public housing. While the rent was negligible, other expenses weren't, and Michael's family, who had always relied on my finances and food, never improved their situation. With the school far away, Mary had to catch an early bus to get to class on time. But she couldn't cope with the hardship and became a problematic child, often skipping school or running away from home. On the other hand, in the shared house, the remaining two friends moved in, and our long-awaited life together began. Perhaps because of the ordeal with my son's family, our life together was surprisingly smooth and comfortable. Living with these strong allies, who had helped me through life's crises, became my greatest support. With a communal space available, we could invite friends who didn't live with us for tea parties, weekend gatherings, and plan trips, creating a stream of enjoyable activities. The absence of stress from my son and his family even allowed me to start writing novels again, something I hadn't done in years. This year, I turned 65. While I wouldn't call my past life unhappy, it was dominated by my husband and son. But now, I can spend my money and time on my life with my housemates. So, I converted all my inheritance into cash. And I plan to live freely and comfortably, using everything except for my retirement savings as I please.
So, there's no money left in this house, right? We don't need to deal with them anymore, do we?
That's true. I guess we don't need our parents anymore.
What?
I mean, cutting ties with you, you know. Humoring a broke old lady doesn't benefit us at all.
Right? She's been trying to mooch off us, and even without a penny to her name, she expects us to take care of her. Better to cut ties now.
I understand your point. So you're saying your inheritance will be just $30,000, and that's the severance for ending the parent-child relationship, right?
Yay, that's fine.
After George passed away, Michael and Daisy showed their true colors. They confronted me with a declaration of disownment, as if to take revenge for their failed plans. $30,000 is a lot of money, but they will regret accepting that money. 2 years after George's death, I was sitting on a park bench, eating my sandwich. The peaceful moment vanished with a familiar voice.
Isn't that Mom over there?
What?
Really? Look, she looks so tired, feeding pigeons in the park.
No, I'm not feeding the pigeons.
Hala, that's true. We took all the money after all, so of course you'd be homeless, huh? How's the homeless life treating you?
My anger had long passed, leaving me speechless and aghast. I sighed softly and resumed my lunch.
Mom, why are you ignoring me? Oh right, we've cut ties, so I shouldn't call you Mom anymore.
How about homeless hag then?
That's a good one, homeless hag, haha.
Michael and Daisy kept mocking me, taking advantage of my silence. After finishing my sandwich, it was time to reveal the truth to them. You've been going on about homeless this, homeless that, but who are you talking about?
We're talking about you, homeless hag.
I'm not homeless, dear. I live over there.
What?
I pointed to a building and explained the truth to Michael and Daisy.
What?
Shocked by the truth, it was too late for them to regret. I am Emily. I'm a 60-year-old housewife. My husband, George, is 67 and still working. George quit his job about 20 years ago to start an IT company. The company has grown successfully, especially in the last 10 years, as he ventured into new fields, leading to rapid growth. Now it's a significant enterprise. I don't quite understand all this data science and big data stuff that George talks about. Given his age, George has already retired as CEO, but he continues to work as the chairman. However, he seems to think it's about time to step down completely. We have one son, Michael. When George retired as CEO, Michael didn't take over the company. He isn't helping with George's company at all, quite the contrary.
I don't want to be seen as living off my father, so I'll do my best on my own.
After graduating from college, Michael joined a company unrelated to IT and moved out. I was a bit disappointed when Michael didn't take over George's company because I had hoped he would. But as a proud parent, I felt a bit proud when I saw him choose not to rely on his powerful parents, and I couldn't help but smile when I heard his decision.
I won't force you, so do what you want.
George seemed to share my sentiments, offering a supportive nudge to Michael, despite looking a bit disappointed. Everything was fine until Michael got a job. After that, he rarely contacted us, only coming home about once a year. Lately, he just calls and doesn't visit at all. Well, I suppose that's not unusual for men, and as long as he's doing fine, that's what matters. Still, I can't help but wish he would reach out more. Then one day, Michael called. It's rare for you to call.
I have something to report. I'll be coming home soon.
What's the report?
I'm getting married, so I want to introduce her to you.
Really? That's wonderful. I was already happy to hear from Michael, but I was ecstatic to hear about his marriage, and I couldn't help but exclaim loudly. My sudden outburst made George, who was leisurely watching TV, jump and turn towards me. I returned his glance with a beaming smile. He looked puzzled, unaware of Michael's marriage news. Michael would bring his fiancée home in a month. Michael will be bringing his bride-to-be home soon.
That's still 3 weeks away.
3 weeks will fly by. Since Michael's call, I've been reminding George almost daily that Michael will be home soon with his bride-to-be. George might be tired of hearing it, but I can't help repeating it. I just can't help being so excited about it. But this marriage announcement would soon bring me a sense of unease. A month later, Michael and his fiancée arrived.
We're home.
Welcome. Come in. George is waiting in the living room.
Thank you.
His fiancée, Daisy, looked young and cute like an idol, instead of having the sleek beauty of a model. Her nervousness, glancing around at the entrance, was endearing. As I led them to the living room where George was waiting, she kept looking around.
Welcome. Have a seat.
In the living room, George seated Michael and Daisy opposite of him. I sat next to him. Daisy continued to look around curiously. Feeling a bit embarrassed by her scrutinizing gaze, I asked her, "Is there something you're curious about?"
Oh, number, it's just. This is so different from what I imagined.
What?
I had heard that George runs a large company.
Hey, don't say embarrassing things like that out of the blue.
Daisy's comment and Michael's flustered attempt to cover her made George and me exchange glances and burst into laughter.
Was the house more ordinary than you expected?
No, it's not that.
Don't worry about it. We're not really into material things. So even though George runs a big company, our house is just average size. And we don't deck ourselves out in designer brands or have fancy meals every day.
I see. I'm sorry for the odd comment out of the blue.
I told you, there's no need to be nervous, right? You see, Dad isn't a very imposing person.
It seems Michael laughed along too. And with Michael's laughter, it appeared that Daisy's nerves had eased, and the conversation flowed smoothly after that. Daisy looks young, but is actually 27, and talking to her, you can tell she's really mature. I had been worried about Michael not marrying even after turning 30, but now that he's going to be happily married, I feel relieved. 3 months later, Michael got married. It's joyous in itself, but Michael's marriage brought an unexpected bonus.
Hello, Mom. Everything okay over there?
Yes, everything's fine.
You and Dad are getting up there in age, so please take care of yourselves.
It seems like that's all you talk about every time you call. Since getting married, Michael has started calling once a month. Daisy probably found out he hadn't been calling at all before and suggested he should call regularly. Michael, not used to calling us, seems unsure what to talk about, always asking about our health instead of discussing his work or marital life. While I wish he'd share more, I always listen with a smile, enjoying his concern. One day, a while after Michael got married, he and Daisy visited us at home. I prepared some homemade appetizers to welcome them with enthusiasm. However, Daisy seemed a bit displeased. Daisy, is there something you can't eat?
No, it's not that. Thank you, I'll eat.
Daisy responded with a smile, but I didn't miss the brief shadow that crossed her face when she saw the appetizers. And she hardly touched them. Maybe there was something she couldn't eat after all. I felt anxious, constantly checking Daisy's expressions, worrying I had made her uncomfortable. I became so fixated on her reaction that I spoke less, even as everyone else seemed to be enjoying the conversation. Eventually, it was time to see Michael and Daisy off. While George and Daisy talked at the door, Michael whispered to me, out of their earshot,
Mom, homemade appetizers aren't really a thing anymore.
"That's not true, is it? There's nothing old or new about homemade appetizers, right?"
That mindset is outdated, Mom. The appetizers you made prioritize shelf life over appeal, right? Nowadays, it's all about using fancy ingredients for appetizers. Daisy must have been disappointed.
Really? I guess I'm out of touch with what young people like these days. I'm sorry. While I believe there's nothing wrong with making appetizers, I was too concerned about Daisy's impression and ended up apologizing to Michael in a low voice. After the small appetizer incident, our monthly calls became less frequent, dropping to once every 2 or 3 months. I felt down, thinking I had upset Daisy with the appetizers. Seeing me like this, George comforted me gently.
Daisy wouldn't get upset over appetizers. Maybe work is just busier, or continuing the monthly calls was too much. Going from no contact to once a month is a big jump, isn't it? Even if it's every 3 months, it's good that he calls at all.
His words lifted my spirits a bit. However, even then, I couldn't say it was a complete recovery, and negative feelings remained in a corner of my heart. And it seemed that the negative emotions lingering in my heart had the power to attract bad things. 6 months later, George fell ill.
This is it. I can't work anymore. Guess it's the right time to retire.
In the hospital bed, George seemed relieved about not having to work anymore. But having been married for 30 years, I understand. He must be thinking he was frustrated about being forced into retirement by illness. He smiled to avoid worrying me, and that consideration pierced my heart. Of course, I had told Michael about his illness.
What? Dead's ill. I'll come to visit soon.
Michael's response over the phone seemed indifferent. George's condition worsened after he collapsed. Still, Michael and Daisy never visited him in the hospital. Gradually, the once every 3-month calls ceased, and they never returned home after he fell ill. Time passed, and 3 years later, George passed away.
So, did finally kick the bucket. Well, he was over 70 and had made his company successful, so he probably lived a content life, right?
Even when I told Michael over the phone about George's passing, his reaction was indifferent. They showed up at the funeral but didn't help out, and as soon as the service was over, Michael and Daisy quickly left. Remembering them laughing as they got into their car, my sadness at George's absence turned into anger. However, this anger was fleeting, and soon I was overwhelmed with sadness again. There was so much to do, like paperwork and clearing up, but I couldn't get anything to progress as I wanted. About a month after George passed, I finally started to feel a bit better. It seems time does heal most wounds. But just as I was regaining my spirits, a new problem emerged. One morning, while doing laundry, the doorbell rang.
Mom, open up.
Looking at the intercom monitor, I saw Michael and Daisy standing there. Confused by their sudden visit, I headed to the front door.
Dad's office was this way.
Hold on.
As I opened the door, without any greetings, Michael and Daisy hurriedly entered and made a beeline for George's office. Left at the entrance in a momentary lapse, I hurried after them.
Where is it?
It's probably in one of these drawers, I guess.
The door to George's office was left open, and I could hear they were rummaging through the drawers. "What are you two doing?" They stopped opening drawers and turned to look at me. I had a hunch, but I was praying it wasn't true.
It's about time to talk about the inheritance, right? So, we came to collect what's ours.
He was the CEO and chairman of a big company, and it seems like he didn't spend much, so there must be plenty of money.
Sadly, my prayers went unanswered. Michael and Daisy threw a few words at me and resumed rifling through the drawers. Seeing them act like thieves, I lost the will to stop them.
Found it. Is this it?
Oh, is it there? What's inside? Haha.
Excitedly, they flipped through George's bank book. But their expressions darkened as they saw the balance.
What's this? There's hardly any money in here.
Damn. So, there wasn't much money after all.
It was clear they had come looking for George's money. But I couldn't grasp what they were talking about, and my thoughts froze, leaving me standing there, dumbfounded.
Mom, you have been living a comfortable life, but what a way to end it, ho.
Michael's voice snapped me back to reality. As my consciousness cleared, I saw them smirking at me. Still not understanding the situation, I was ready to be ridiculed as I asked Michael, "What do you mean by a terrible end?"
No need to play dumb, we know.
George's company was taken over when he got sick, right?
That means it was in the red and got absorbed by another company, right?
What? What are you talking about?
A guy holding a company that's almost bankrupt surely doesn't have any money. Still, we thought that being at the top of a big company, even if it was going downhill, there would be some money left. My plan is ruined.
Yeah, what a disappointment.
Wait, what are you talking about? Despite listening to them, I couldn't understand a thing, and frustrated, I raised my voice. But they, still with their villainous grins, were unfazed by my outburst.
I didn't join Dad's company because it seemed like a tough job with all that complex stuff. Why sweat it out at Dad's company when I could just wait and inherit his fortune, right? Exactly. It's smarter to just coast through an easy job, huh? Aw man, yet things didn't go as planned.
I tried to stay on your good side at first, being all nice and making Michael call you. Even endured those awful homemade appetizers.
You stopped all that once it was clear Dad wasn't a tough guy, right?
And you just accepted it as downgrading from a sure-win life to a normal one when you heard Dad sold the company.
I'd give up, but you'd expect at least $100,000 in savings, right? Look at this bank book, only $30,000. I wonder if closing a company costs a lot.
Well, we should be grateful for these $30,000 and just take it.
Listening to Michael and Daisy blabbering selfishly, my anger was on the verge of exploding. But I clenched my teeth and pushed down the words rising in my throat.
What's wrong? Your face is all red. So, there's no money left in this house, right? No need to bother with you anymore, right?
That's true. We don't need a parent who spoiled my plan.
What?
We're cutting ties with you. No point in sucking up to a broke mill, right?
We don't want to be hassled for money or care when you don't have a penny to your name. Better to cut ties now.
I get your point. So your inheritance is just that $30,000. And that's our severance for cutting ties, right? I can keep the rest, right?
Yay, that's fine. We don't need this house, and we don't want to be saddled with any debt. We're good with just the $30,000.
Michael and Daisy left laughing, just like at the funeral. I didn't want to give them even $30,000. $30,000 is a lot of money. But later, they will regret receiving that $30,000. 2 years after George passed away, I was roaming around town on an errand. Moving around is tough when you're past your mid-60s. Exhausted, I decided to rest on a park bench. With a heave, I sat down and took out a sandwich I bought from the supermarket for a quick lunch. As I ate, pigeons gathered around. Watching the pigeons, I felt at peace. Indeed, they are a symbol of peace. But that tranquil moment was shattered by a familiar voice.
Isn't that Mom over there?
What?
It's true. Look, she's got that tired look, feeding pigeons in the park.
No, I'm not feeding the pigeons.
Holla, that's right. Still not spending on appearances, huh? Oh, I guess you have no money left to spend. We took all the money, so naturally, you'd be homeless, right? How's homeless life treating you?
Michael and Daisy never really listened to me. My anger has long passed, and now I'm just speechless and dumbfounded. I sighed quietly and resumed my lunch.
Mom, why are you ignoring me? Oh, right, we cut ties, so I shouldn't call you Mom anymore.
How about homeless hag then?
That's a good one, homeless hag.
They continued to mock me, laughing at their own cruel jokes. After finishing my sandwich, it was time to reveal the truth to them. You've been going on about homeless this, homeless that, but who are you talking about?
We're talking about you, homeless hag.
I'm not homeless, dear. I live over there.
What?
I pointed to a building. They slowly turned their gaze in the direction I was pointing. Though it appeared small and distant, it was a fine high-rise condo. I thought luxurious condos weren't my thing at first, but living there proved to be convenient. That condo has barrier-free units for the elderly, and I live in one. Plus, with care staff on site 24/7, I feel safe knowing help is always available.
What? Stop bluffing. There's no way a homeless hag like you could afford to live there.
Well, yes, that's the condo George left for me.
What do you mean?
He actually owned 5 condos. I moved into one, and I'm the owner of the others, so I have rental income. That's why I'm not struggling for living expenses.
Ha ha ha. If you're going to lie, at least make it a believable one.
It's true. I'll show you proof, but only a little since I don't usually show off. I pulled out documents related to the ownership and rental agreements of the condos from my bag, and they were so shocked their jaws could have dropped. My errand today was related to these condos, so I happened to have the documents with me. They seemed skeptical, but after seeing these documents, they finally understood I was telling the truth.
Where did Dad get that kind of money?
You two thought Dad's company was sold at a loss, but it was actually a proper sale. He bought these condos as an investment with the money from selling the company. That's why there was only $30,000 in savings. I think he wanted to leave an inheritance in a form other than cash. Maybe he still wanted to do something business-like after suddenly retiring due to his illness. Realizing the truth about the condos but only receiving $30,000, they were in a daze. However, claiming to own 5 buildings might seem like a stretch, as Michael suggested. Building one condo costs millions. For 5, it would be hundreds of millions. It's unlikely to have that much money just from selling a company, and even big corporations can't easily build 5 condos. Actually, I own units in different buildings, not entire buildings. When I said 5 buildings, I meant that I own units in 5 different buildings, totaling 6 units. It was easier to say it that way. They seem to have misunderstood that I own entire condo buildings, but I can't be bothered to correct them, so I'll let it be. Moreover, it ended up sounding like I owned 5 whole buildings when I actually have units in 5 buildings, but owning 6 units is still significant. Each condo unit he bought costs over $500,000. So with 6 units, that's over $3 million. He invested most of the money from selling his company into these condos. He must have had a lot of fun making one last big purchase with the money he worked his whole life to earn.
Now that you have so many, shouldn't you share one with us?
Yay, managing all that must be tough for you alone. We can help.
When they learned I was an owner of multiple condo units, they became cautious in their words, their speech awkward. Their attitudes flipped entirely. Of course, I can't trust such people. No need for concern from someone I've cut ties with.
What?
Wait, even if we've cut ties, we're still family. That means when you're gone, the condos automatically come to me, right?
Yeah, right. No need to apologize to this old lady here.
They began to smirk again like villains. But I have no intention of handing over George's precious legacy to such unkind people. Unfortunately, you won't be getting anything.
Planning to write in your will not to pass on anything to me, that's useless. I know my rights as a child can't be easily nullified.
Yes, that's why I plan to dispose of the assets eventually.
What?
I intend to transfer the condos to George's acquaintances.
What?
I live in one of the 6 condo units, but the rest are inhabited by George's friends. They are all married and running their own businesses, so I don't expect them to move until I pass on. Thus, I don't worry about vacancies. The people living in my condo units have supported me and were helped by George during his lifetime, so when my time comes to join him, I plan to transfer the condos to them. I think it's much better than leaving them to Michael and Daisy. Also, I'm thinking of donating the money gradually accumulating from the condo rents to his cherished company. It won't be a large amount, but since I've already given Michael and Daisy $30,000, I don't want to give them a penny more. Well, when my time comes, I'll make sure to leave absolutely nothing behind.
What?
Michael collapsed to the ground, drained of strength upon realizing I had no intention of leaving anything behind. $30,000 is a lot of money, but it's not an unattainable amount for Michael to earn. Of course, he would regret throwing away the chance for the condos for just $30,000. It's not pleasant to talk about life after you're gone while you're still alive. But this time, I took pleasure in seeing their frantic faces. Well, I've got other things to do, so I'll be going now. Goodbye, estranged strangers. After my break, I left a park with a light step. Michael was so regretful about missing out on the condos that he ended up buying a small apartment building. But driven by his frustration and lack of knowledge, he struggled with increasing occupancy, and the building seems to be plagued with vacancies. Consequently, he's been dealing with ongoing financial losses. After sinking his savings into the apartment and taking out loans, he can't sustain this forever and will eventually need to sell. If that happens, he might be left with a massive debt. And if he struggles to find a buyer, the situation could become even more dire. If no buyer is found, he might have to demolish the building and sell just the land, which would be a terrifying thought with demolition costs added to the debt. I live comfortably in a senior-friendly condo. The residents of my condo, who were helped by George, also look after me. While living alone as an elderly person can be lonely, that's not the case for me. The weather looks nice today, so I might go for another walk in the park.
Zoe, Grandma can't hear well, so let's greet her loudly, okay? Zoe and I walked through the gate of my in-laws' house. Hello, Mary. It's been a while.
Hello.
Mary, my mother-in-law, looked tense and stiff. I noticed her hearing aids, which gave me some relief, thinking we could probably have a normal conversation. She glanced at Zoe, who was standing quietly next to me, but then quickly looked away. Zoe, still holding my hand, squeezed it tightly and took a deep breath.
Hi, Grandma. It's so nice to finally see you.
Zoe's loud, clear voice echoed in the entrance hall like a cheerleader at a sports event. I assumed it was because I had just told her to speak loudly. But it was likely also because she was excited and happy to finally meet her grandmother. I thought Mary, even with her hearing loss, would surely hear this. I was looking forward to her reaction. But to my surprise, Mary suddenly covered her ears and crouched down. Mary? I approached to rub her back, seeing her pale face and chattering teeth, but she pushed my hand away, twisting her body in rejection. Calm down, Mary. I'm sorry we startled you. This is your granddaughter, Zoe. She's been looking forward to meeting you. I tried to explain to calm her down, but Mary remained in a panic, stubbornly turning her back to Zoe.
Get away from this child.
She screamed and ran into the back room. Zoe and I stood there, stunned, watching Mary. Zoe was obviously shocked, and tears welled up in her eyes.
Mom, why?
All I could do was silently hold Zoe as she clung to me. My name is Emily, and I'm 34 years old. I live with my husband Kevin and our daughter Zoe.
Daddy, listen. Yesterday, 2 butterflies flew into my classroom.
Zoe's chatter during breakfast was as lively as ever.
Oh, really? Did you catch them?
Kevin, sipping his coffee, listened to Zoe's story.
No, it was during class, so we all had to sit still. But then both butterflies landed on the teacher's head.
Zoe giggled at the memory. Kevin looked at her curiously.
Did the teacher notice?
Nope, didn't notice. So, we all told him. But before he could check in the mirror, the butterflies flew away.
Kevin, not quite getting why it was so funny, glanced at me for help. Zoe's teacher is built like a boxing coach, big and tough, and supposedly really scary.
But yesterday, he looked like he was wearing a cute bow on his head. And guess what he said? I guess even butterflies are into me.
Kevin and I watched Zoe laugh heartily, both of us smiling at her joy. Zoe, who turned 9 this year, is a bright, energetic girl. She has lots of friends and seems to enjoy school every day.
Oh, by the way, butterflies aren't counted as 1 or 2. You say 1 head or 2 heads.
What? Really? That's so cool, Dad. I'm totally telling my teacher when I get to school.
Kevin looked pleased with Zoe's compliment. In our house, breakfast was the one precious time we could all be together. Both of us work, but Kevin's job is especially busy, and he usually doesn't get home until after 9 p.m. He often comes back after Zoe has already gone to bed. He even works on weekends a lot, so the 3 of us only go out together maybe once a month. That's why we cherished our family time at breakfast.
Mom, can I go to Sophia's house after school today?
Sure. Oh, can you take these cookies with you? Make sure to tell Sophia's mom, thank you for everything.
Okay.
Now in the 4th grade, Zoe no longer goes to after-school care this year. She often plays at her friend's house nearby. I can work without being anxious. Though I couldn't give her a sibling, she's blessed with good friends. And with her outgoing personality and natural ability to make friends with anyone, Zoe doesn't seem to feel lonely. I'm home. When I got home that evening, Zoe came rushing to the door with an even bigger smile than usual.
Welcome back. Mom, guess what? I got this from Sophia's grandma.
Oh, what a cute handkerchief.
Her grandma came to visit from Florida.
Now that she mentioned it, I remembered Sophia's mom saying she was from Florida. She had told me it was hard to go back home because it was so far away. Her grandma really came all the way here.
Grandma was supposed to be at the house already, so we ran home from school the whole way, except at the traffic lights. It was as tough as a marathon.
I could just picture the 2 of them running with their backpacks bouncing out of breath. Sophia must have been so happy, right?
Yeah. Her grandma was super nice.
Suddenly, Zoe's face looked a little sad. Zoe, what's wrong? She gripped the handkerchief tightly.
I want to see my grandma.
I couldn't respond right away, so I gently patted Zoe's head as she looked down. I was raised by a single mom, and she passed away when I was 22. As for Kevin's dad, he passed away when Kevin was 20. So the only grandparent Zoe has is Kevin's mom, Mary. Mary lives about 2 hours away by car. If we wanted to, we could visit anytime, but Zoe has never met her grandmother. Like I've told you before, Grandma doesn't hear well, so she's not comfortable meeting people. Zoe had mentioned several times before that she wanted to meet her grandmother.
All my friends go to their grandparents' houses for Christmas. Grandparents' Day is when you thank your grandma and grandpa, right?
As Zoe grew older, she started to question why, even though she had a grandmother, she wasn't able to meet her. I had only met Mary a few times before Zoe was born. Mary already had hearing loss at that time, and her attitude toward me was always distant. Does she hate me? When I first went to introduce myself before getting married, I was completely disheartened by her cold demeanor. I hadn't had the best relationship with my mom, so I wasn't confident that I could get along with Mary either.
No, that's not it. Ever since she lost her hearing, she's been like that with everyone, even our family.
Kevin let out a deep sigh.
She used to be a cheerful person, but after I moved out, she started acting strange all of a sudden. We took her to the hospital, and they said she had sudden hearing loss and was emotionally unstable because of it.
I understood she didn't hate me, but I couldn't help worrying about how things would go from then on.
Just give her space. She said she prefers being alone.
If that's what Mary wanted, we ended up visiting my in-laws only once a year for the holidays, even though they lived within driving distance. And that was before we had kids. When are you going to take Zoe to see Mary? Maybe inviting her to a family party or something. I assumed that no one could resist the joy of meeting their grandchild. I had convinced myself of that. Do you think Mary will smile when she sees Zoe? I was sure that once she saw such a cute granddaughter, her heart would open up. While I was feeling so cheerful, Kevin spoke to me apologetically.
Actually, my mom doesn't like kids.
What? I couldn't process his unexpected words right away. Isn't it different with grandchildren? People always say they'd do anything for them. Surely, seeing her own grandchild, especially a baby, would stir up feelings of affection, right? But Kevin lowered his gaze and quietly shook his head.
She told me not to bring a baby, even after her grandchild was born.
Hearing Kevin's words, it felt like I'd been hit over my head.
Sorry, don't take it the wrong way. I couldn't get all the details, but apparently my mom has some kind of trauma. So, it's not that she dislikes her grandchild. She just doesn't like kids.
I could tell how carefully Kevin was choosing his words, trying not to hurt me, Mary, or Zoe. I didn't know when Mary had said that to him, but it was clear Kevin had been carrying it alone, not wanting to hurt me. I felt guilty. I see. I'm sorry, I had no idea. Okay, let's have the party with just the three of us. Zoe, let's celebrate with Daddy and Mommy. I acted as cheerful as possible, so my anxiety wouldn't rub off on Zoe, who was looking up at me with her big eyes.
Mom, you've met Grandma before, right? What's she like? Does she look like me?
Zoe stared at me with those big eyes. The last time I saw her was before you were born, and we barely talked. So, honestly, I still don't know what she's like. I'm sorry. I realized it had been 9 years since I'd last seen Mary.
But every year, she sends me money for Christmas, right? So, Grandma must be a really nice person.
Yes. Ever since Zoe was born, Mary had sent not just a card, but also a little money each Christmas by registered mail. Since phone calls were difficult due to her hearing loss, I would send a thank you email. But after Zoe learned to write, I had her send thank you letters. We never got a reply. But Mary's consistent Christmas gifts made Zoe quietly feel her grandmother's warmth. You're right. She must be kind. I agreed, hoping to reassure Zoe. Normally, this would be enough to ease Zoe's desire to meet her grandmother, but not this time. After meeting Sophia's grandmother, Zoe's determination to meet her own grew even stronger.
Let's go see Grandma.
I'll talk to Daddy about it, okay? I wanted to grant Zoe's wish. And though it was late, I also wanted to build a relationship with Mary myself. With that decision, I asked Kevin to reach out to Mary.
Mom said it's okay.
5 days later, Kevin said this while patting Zoe's head.
We're going to visit her this Sunday.
Zoe's face lit up, and Kevin and I both felt relieved.
Yay! Oh, let's bring a present. Do you think Grandma will like it?
For so long, Mary had avoided meeting her grandchild. So why the change of heart? It was Zoe's words that triggered it.
What would you like for your birthday?
When Kevin asked Zoe, who was celebrating her birthday this month, she answered, I want to see Grandma. She wanted it so badly. Both Kevin and I realized how much this meant to her. We had to make this happen. Kevin worked on convincing Mary every day, and finally she gave in.
Daddy, what does Grandma like?
The morning before their first meeting, Zoe, eating more than usual, asked Kevin this question.
What does she like? Let's see.
Kevin struggled to remember what his own mom liked, and Zoe was half amused, half annoyed.
Okay, how about dogs or cats? Which does she like better?
She used to draw a little cat next to my name when I was a kid, so probably cats.
What's her favorite fruit?
She used to make strawberry jam, so I'd say strawberries.
Does she like sunny or rainy days?
I think she likes the rain. She used to have a garden full of flowers, and she'd always smile, saying the rain made the plants happy.
Whoa. Zoe's excellent questions were revealing a side of Mary I didn't know, and even parts of her that Kevin had forgotten.
What's her favorite flower?
Well, why don't you ask Grandma directly when you see her next time?
Yeah, I will.
Zoe and Kevin smiled at each other. That night, as I lay in bed, I thought about my late mom. What were her favorite things? All I could remember was her busy figure, rushing around doing housework and hurrying out the door. What was her favorite food? Her favorite sport? Her favorite color? I couldn't answer any of those with certainty. She was my only family, and yet I had avoided facing her, afraid to get close. I regretted that. I didn't want Zoe or Mary to have the same kind of regrets I did. I went to sleep hoping that tomorrow I would see lots of smiles from Zoe and Mary. With that thought in my heart, I drifted off to sleep.
I'm sorry. I'll call my mom and explain everything.
The next morning, Kevin rushed out the door in his suit, hurrying to work. It seemed there was an emergency, and he had to go in suddenly. I never imagined that after 9 years, Zoe and I would be the ones to visit Mary without Kevin. A wave of anxiety washed over me. But Zoe, showing no sign of concern, was efficiently getting her things ready.
I packed my handkerchief and hat. I've got a present for Grandma too. Mom, are you ready yet?
Just a second. If we face this together, we'll get through it. I repeated this to myself, straightening my posture so Zoe wouldn't sense my anxiety. 2 hours later. Look, there she is. Grandma's waiting for us. I spotted Mary, nervously glancing around outside her house, and felt a bit relieved. She looked thinner. Even from a distance, I could see that Mary, whom I hadn't seen in 9 years, had clearly aged. Then she looked in our direction and our eyes met, so I waved. But she quickly turned and rushed back into the house.
Grandma went inside.
Zoe, Grandma can't hear very well, so let's greet her loudly, okay? Regaining my composure, we walked through the gate of the house. Hello, Mary. It's been a while.
Hello.
Mary's expression was stiff, her face tense with nervousness. I noticed her hearing aids and felt relieved, thinking we could at least have a conversation. She glanced at Zoe, standing quietly beside me, but then quickly looked away. Zoe, holding my hand, squeezed it tightly and took a deep breath.
Hi, Grandma. I'm so happy to finally meet you.
Zoe's loud, clear voice rang out in the entrance hall like a cheerleader's shout at a sports event. She must have remembered that I told her to speak loudly. And I'm sure her excitement about finally meeting her grandmother added to the energy in her voice. Even with her hearing loss, Mary must have heard that. I eagerly awaited her reaction, but Mary blinked for a moment and suddenly crouched down, covering her ears. Mary? I moved closer, trying to rub her back, seeing her pale face and trembling body, but she pushed my hand away and twisted to reject my touch. Mary, please calm down. I'm sorry for startling you. This is Zoe, your granddaughter. She's been looking forward to meeting you. I tried to explain, hoping to calm her, but Mary remained in a panic, stubbornly turning her back to Zoe.
Get away from this child.
Mary shouted and ran into the back room. Zoe and I stood there, stunned, watching her. Tears quickly welled up in Zoe's eyes, clearly hurt by her grandmother's reaction on their first meeting. That was a terrible reaction for a first encounter. I wanted to shout at Mary, but it was obvious her condition wasn't something simple.
Mom, why?
Zoe clung to me, and all I could do was hold her in silence. I was sure Kevin didn't know Mary was in such a state. If he had known, he never would have let Zoe and me go to his mother's house alone. Even though it might hurt him to know the reality of his mother's situation, I knew I had to contact Kevin quickly. As I reached for my phone to call him, my eyes caught sight of a large present with a big red ribbon in front of the room where Mary had fled. Could that be a gift for Zoe? I hung up the phone before Kevin answered. Zoe, let me talk to Grandma. It'll be okay. I reassured her and approached the door to the room where Mary was hiding, knocking softly. Mary, you don't have to come out. I'd just like to talk to you for a moment if you don't mind. I spoke toward the door, though there was no response. As you know, my mom passed away 12 years ago. She was my only family, but I misunderstood her right up until the very end. My mom raised me alone after her divorce. She came home from work after 8 p.m. every night. I spent a lot of time alone, but no matter how busy she was, she always prepared dinner for me in the morning before she left for work. So, even though eating alone was lonely, I was lucky that I never had to wait with an empty stomach. When I got to high school, my mom started making me lunch every day. Her cold homemade meals were delicious, but for some reason they also made me feel a strange sense of loneliness at times. She provided everything I needed, bought me the things I required, and even gave me spending money. But what I really wanted was her warmth. I wished she would ask me about school, and I wanted her to scold me when I got bad grades. I wanted her to notice when I was having trouble with my friends. But at home, she always sighed. She had always been a quiet person, but after it was just the two of us, it seemed like she had no interest in me at all. I thought, Mom must hate me. As I grew up, I began to avoid her. And as soon as I graduated from high school, I left home, feeling like I was running away. But a few years later, I got a call from her, and when I went to see her, she was lying in a hospital bed, thin and frail. The doctor said she had about a week left. That's when I finally spoke to her honestly. Why didn't you call me before it got this bad?
Because I didn't want to bother you.
She said, her face expressionless. You wouldn't have bothered me. We're family. And Mom, it must have been so hard for you, taking care of me all alone. I'm sorry. My voice started to tremble as I spoke, feeling hollow.
Yes, it was hard, but I could do it because I had you.
What? I was speechless, completely taken aback by her words.
I'm sorry I never had the energy to listen to you or even grant you one selfish request.
I thought you didn't care about me, that you hated me.
That's not true at all. I always wanted to talk to you more, even about little things. But I never had the time, and eventually, it became harder to start those conversations.
My mom smiled sadly. I didn't know it was like that. I had misunderstood everything.
When Emily left, I cried so much. I didn't know what I was supposed to live for anymore. But you know, it's surprising how people can manage on their own.
I remembered the email my mom sent me the day after I left home.
Why you live and who you live for. Those are very important questions in life.
At the time, I didn't understand what she meant by that email. She hardly ever emailed me, so why now of all times? Was she trying to say that now that I was gone, she could finally live for herself? I recalled how I twisted that message in my mind and ended up resenting her for it. But now, realizing how much my leaving had hurt her, I hated the way I had acted back then.
I'm sorry for all the trouble I caused, even at the end.
It wasn't trouble. I just wanted you to live longer. I had so much to tell you, so many places I wanted to go with you. My mom held my hand, which was trembling like a child's, her touch a little cold but gentle. The next day, she started to fade, slipping in and out of consciousness. 3 days later, she quietly passed away before my eyes. I was so afraid to face my family, and because of that fear, I lived with misunderstandings for years. In the end, we cleared things up, but I never got back the time I lost with my mom. That's something I deeply regret. Suddenly, I heard a faint rustling from inside the room. Mary must have come closer to the door. I continued speaking. I promised myself I would never have those kinds of regrets with my family again. I decided that if I ever had a family of my own, I would face them honestly. So, Mary, if there's anything on your mind, please talk to us. After a while, Mary, who had been silent, opened the door just a crack. You're not alone, Mary. If you're struggling with something, let us help you get through it. This was what I most wanted to convey to her. I had said everything I needed to, so now I waited for her response. Eventually, Mary slowly stepped out of the room. It's okay, take your time. I gently guided Mary, who was looking at me nervously, to a chair near the door and gave her a reassuring look.
17 years ago, there was a fire at my workplace.
Then Mary began to speak slowly, carefully choosing her words. She had been working part-time at an alternative school for children who couldn't attend regular school. Before the fire, she could hear perfectly and had loved being around children.
Even though some of the kids had trouble going to school, they were just normal kids, just a little more sensitive. I wanted them to know that even outside their families, there were people who cared about them.
Her work, which she had started after her own children were grown, had brought her so much joy.
But one day, the fire alarm went off out of nowhere.
The fire had started on the 6th floor of the building, where the alternative school was located. Looking up from the classroom window on the 2nd floor, they could see thick smoke rising.
Stay calm, everyone. We're going to evacuate, so follow me.
They had practiced this evacuation drill once a year, so as long as they followed it, everything would be fine. Although it was their first real emergency, Mary and the other adults remained calm, trying to reassure the 6 children present. However, the children, sensitive to changes, quickly reacted. One girl began to panic and started crying and screaming.
It's going to be okay. Let's walk quietly and head outside.
Mary tried to reassure her, but the girl struggled and fought, trying to break free from Mary's hold. The girl was in the 6th grade and was big for her age. She pushed Mary with all her strength, sending her crashing into the wall. As Mary doubled over in pain, the girl bolted toward the stairs.
Someone, please go after Zoe.
Coincidentally, the girl's name was Zoe, just like my daughter. At that moment, I realized something. Of course, Zoe hadn't been born yet at that time. But it was clear now that Mary's refusal to meet her granddaughter was connected to this incident. In the end, another teacher managed to get Zoe out safely, and everyone, both students and teachers, made it out without injury. It was Mary's first experience with such a traumatic event. Despite feeling overwhelmed with anxiety, Mary had done everything she could to protect the children, but the fire made her painfully aware of her own helplessness. She had always found joy in being relied on by the kids and watching them grow, and she thought this job was a perfect fit for her. But after the fire, she lost all her confidence.
My coworkers told me to reflect on the experience and use it to move forward, but I was under more stress than I realized.
After the fire, Mary started having nightmares every night. In the dreams, the children were running in terror from the flames. "Help! It's so hot!" The children's screams echoed, but no matter how hard she tried, she couldn't reach them. In fact, she would always wake up at the part where the firefighters saved her first, leaving her screaming outside the building. The nightmares became so unbearable that Mary began avoiding sleep altogether. Eventually, she felt dazed all the time, unable to tell if she was awake or dreaming.
I became so depressed that I couldn't face anyone, and the stress triggered my hearing loss. I had to quit my job, and my family started treating me like I was fragile.
Her family never treated Mary poorly. They were just careful and avoided asking too much about the fire or her hearing loss. Mary, on the other hand, hated being treated delicately, so she distanced herself from them instead of asking for help.
In the end, the fire was put out quickly, and nothing serious happened. No one was injured. So no one, except my psychiatrist, knows that I've been carrying this trauma.
What might seem minor to others can be a deeply significant event for the person who lived through it. But explaining that to others can be so hard. I thought back to my own experiences. I understand. You can explain the situation, but getting people to truly understand your feelings is much harder, isn't it? I wonder if I could have told my mom that I was lonely by myself at that time. What if I had said, "We don't need a fancy dinner. Let's just sit and talk instead"? Maybe we could have had a better relationship. But even when you muster the courage to open up, if the other person doesn't understand or misinterprets you, it can lead to deeper despair. And when that person is someone you want most to understand your family, the despair is even greater. Maybe that's why I couldn't be honest with my mom about how I felt. Perhaps it's because our closest family members are the ones we distance ourselves from the most.
The truth is, I always wanted to meet my granddaughter, but when I heard her name, that scene flashed back. When Kevin told me her name, I just yelled, "I hate kids. Don't bring her here."
So that was it. I glanced around the room and noticed 10 presents lined up by the window, each with a red ribbon. They all had the same wrapping as the gift we saw earlier in front of the room. Are those? Mary followed my gaze and gave a small, shy smile.
They're all birthday presents for Zoe. I've prepared them every year, thinking, maybe this year, but I could never work up my courage. The one on the left is a pair of tiny socks for when she was born. The one next to it is an apron for when she turned 1 and for her second birthday.
For the last 9 years, we had accepted the idea that Mary simply didn't like children, but now I realized she had been struggling alone all this time. Even though I had resolved to face my family, I hadn't truly done so, and now I regretted it deeply. I'm so sorry for not knowing any of this.
No, it's my fault for not saying anything.
Now that Mary had shared her trauma, she looked lighter and more at ease than she had just minutes ago.
Thank you for telling me your story, and thank you for listening to mine. Because of you, I feel ready to face my family and my own trauma.
I haven't fully moved on from my past either. But let's face it together and overcome it as a family. I held out my hand, and Mary grasped my hand firmly and gently with a warm, wrinkled hand.
Mom. Grandma.
At that moment, Zoe peeked hesitantly around the door.
Can I come in?
When Mary looked at her, she nodded, albeit nervously.
Grandma, can we talk? I love cats too. And I love strawberries. I drew a picture for you. It's you, surrounded by all the things you love, smiling. I asked Daddy, and I tried to make it look like you.
Thanks to Zoe's natural ability to make friends with anyone, Mary's expression softened immediately. Mary reached out her free hand to Zoe. Then, she held Zoe's hand as well.
Thank you, Zoe. You're already 9, aren't you? I'll tell you everything.
Mary, gathering her courage, began explaining her trauma and hearing loss to Zoe in a way she could understand.
I'm sorry for scaring you, Grandma.
Zoe, tears welling in her eyes, apologized, saying that she had reminded Mary of something painful by greeting her so loudly.
I just overreacted, that's all. And it's only because that little girl who panicked during the fire had the same name, Zoe. But you didn't do anything wrong.
Mary gently pulled Zoe into a hug. Zoe, what do you think those are? I pointed to the presents by the window.
Oh, there was one in front of the door too. Grandma, what are they?
Mary smiled shyly.
They're all for you, Zoe.
What? Really?
Zoe's eyes went wide with surprise as she looked back and forth between Mary and the presents. She had never imagined they were for her.
They're things I meant to give you over the years, but now they're mostly useless. You don't need baby socks or an apron for eating anymore.
Mary laughed, a little embarrassed, and Zoe hugged her tightly.
Grandma, I wish we could have come sooner. I'm sorry for making you wait.
You don't have to apologize, Zoe. It was just a misunderstanding on our part. I'm sorry.
You all did nothing wrong. I'm the one who didn't say anything. I'm sorry.
The three of us exchanged glances and suddenly burst out laughing.
We're all apologizing out of kindness.
Kindness overload. What a beautiful phrase. I felt moved by Zoe's sensitivity, and her presence filled me with strength. With this family, I was certain we could gently heal from the past and move forward. Just then, my phone rang.
Sorry I missed your call. Is everything okay?
It was Kevin. He had taken the time to call back after I had hung up the phone after about 3 rings earlier. I put the phone on speaker. Right now, we're having a kindness overload.
That's a relief to hear. What a wonderful phrase.
Kevin replied, making both Mary and Zoe smile. I'll tell you more when I get home.
Okay. Be safe on the way back. Can you tell Mom I'll come next time too? And, if possible, ask her to make hamburgers?
Got it. Kevin had no idea he was on speaker. Hearing his slightly embarrassed voice, Mary nodded with tears in her eyes. He says so.
My boy has always loved hamburgers. But you know, making hamburgers can be a bit of a hassle, right? He used to throw a fit whenever he wanted them, even when I was busy.
Though she was a bit embarrassed, Mary was clearly happy to hear her son's request. Well, Mary, your hamburgers are so amazing that Kevin doesn't even ask for them at home anymore.
Is that so?
Mary, would you teach me how to make them sometime?
If you'd like. This feels like one of those daughter-in-law and mother-in-law moments, doesn't it?
With our hearts now open to each other, we enjoyed a light-hearted conversation. Before we knew it, it was time to leave.
Here, it's a little early, but happy 10th birthday.
Mary handed Zoe the present that had been sitting by the door.
Thank you, Grandma. Can I open it?
Of course. I hope you like it.
Zoe's eyes sparkled with excitement, while Mary watched her nervously. It was such a heartwarming sight.
Wow! It's so cute.
Seeing Zoe jump for joy at the gift, Mary breathed a sigh of relief.
Is it okay if I keep the gifts I couldn't give you as memories? They've become an important part of the room's decor.
Of course. And don't worry, I won't let the gifts pile up anymore because I'll be here every year to collect them.
Zoe's cheeky response made us all laugh until the last moment before we had to part ways. Since that day, our relationship has changed dramatically. Mary, how was your appointment today? I had started emailing Mary regularly, casually checking in on how she was doing.
The doctor said I'm lucky to have such a wonderful family.
Her longtime psychiatrist seemed surprised at how much Mary had brightened up.
But I was reminded not to push myself too hard. Sudden changes can lead to emotional ups and downs.
That made sense. In the past, Mary would have kept something like the doctor's warning to herself. She would have only shared the good news to avoid burdening anyone. But now things are different. She had learned the importance of facing family openly, sharing both the good and the bad without hiding anything. Even if we shared everything, our family wouldn't break. We had discovered that we shared a strong bond that could withstand anything. Mary went to the doctor today. I told Kevin when he came home late one night, relaying what Mary had written.
Actually, she sent me the same message.
Really? I was surprised that she had included Kevin in the update as well.
Yeah, I asked her to tell me everything, because I'm pretty slow on picking up things on my own. And I told her if I misunderstood, I'd rather be corrected than left in the dark.
Kevin had regretted taking Mary's words about disliking children at face value, leading to 9 years of not bringing Zoe to her grandmother's house. It's not your fault. Being so open to everything is one of your best qualities. Mary had promised to share everything with her son from now on. The four of us had vowed to face the past and move forward together. You can't expect family to understand everything without saying a word. It's precisely because we're family that we need to trust each other enough to be open and vulnerable.
Grandma, I'm home.
Welcome back. Did you have fun at school?
Yeah. We had science today.
Zoe had become a total grandma's girl, video chatting with Mary every day after school. Having Mary as a strong supporter made me feel more at ease, allowing me to focus on work without worry. Since that day, visiting Mary's house once a month as a family had become a routine. Every time, Zoe brought an album showing Mary photos of her younger self.
This one's from when we went to the zoo for the first time. The goat bit my clothes, and I cried. And here, this is when I used a fork for the first time.
Mary gazed at the photos of Zoe as a baby, her eyes softening with emotion. The loneliness of those 9 years seemed to be gradually replaced by joy. I also had been filling in the gaps from those years, learning Mary's homemade recipes with each visit. I made Mary's famous hamburgers for dinner the other night.
How did they turn out?
Perfect. They were such a hit that I promised to make them again during the long weekend. Mary and I laughed together in the kitchen. I never imagined we'd have moments like this. The pain from the past, which I could never have overcome alone, was now healing thanks to the strong bond within our family. It wasn't just Mary, but I was too. Recently, I was able to remember one thing my late mom loved. It was the viola flower. When I brought home the potted violas I had grown in elementary school, my mom gave me a rare smile.
Mom, you like violas, don't you?
Yes, aren't they cute? Emily, violas suit you.
Really?
It was just a casual conversation, but I suddenly realized that I had been the kind of girl who suited my mom's favorite flowers. It made me think that my mom really did love me. At that moment, Zoe came into the kitchen.
Grandma, what's your favorite flower?
By coincidence, she had asked Mary the same question.
Go take a look at the flower bed. A bunch of them are blooming right now.
Mary smiled warmly.
Daddy, let's go see the flowers.
Zoe pulled Kevin along as they hurried out the front door. What kind of flowers does Mary like, I wonder? Curious, I followed them out to the garden.
Wow! So pretty.
In the flower bed, tiny purple violas swayed gently in the soft breeze.